Call the meeting in order, the Silver Falls School Board. First on attendance, everybody but Tom, and he texts he's on his way. He'll just be a little late, so he is on his way. So, flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For agenda review, came to my attention that we probably need to add under action items 12D to fill out the OSBA ballot, because that actually takes a vote of our board. And so we'll discuss it under discussion, but then the actual vote that we record, we'd need to take in action item. So if there's no objection, I'd like to add that as 12D, fill out OSBA ballot.
Need a motion for that, right? Or not?
Well, we can do it as a motion on the agenda with that addition.
I move to adjust the agenda to include the OSBA item on 12D.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded with the addition of the 12D on the OSBA ballot added to the presented agenda. Any more discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Nays? Ayes have it. Okay, consent agenda. Entertain a motion on it.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Ayes have it. And now we have favorite part, student representatives.
Hello, my name is Mariah Wacker. I am a sophomore and one of the ASB School Board representatives from Silverton High School.
My name is Sam Posgate, and I am a junior, and I'm also the ASB Club Coordinator. And I will be speaking today on behalf of Kai, and we will be presenting on behalf of the student body as a whole.
We are very excited to announce that we are on our last stretch of Tree of Giving fundraiser for this holiday season. For those who are unfamiliar, the Tree of Giving fundraiser event is put on by Silverton High School ASB in partnership with the Zenith Women's Club and the SHS Counseling Department.
We work to raise money to provide Christmas presents for youth in our community who are in need, and every donation will help us purchase clothes, toys, gifts, and essentials that will make their holiday season even brighter.
Our goal is to raise $5,000 through fundraisers hosted inside and outside of the high school. ASB has put on many successful fundraisers, and we only have a few more to go.
Ways that community members can help us reach our goal of $5,000 is by donating with our donation website and participating in our Foxathon on December 14th. Registration for this event can be found on the website. It is a 5K on our school campus and includes family fun throughout. There's a prize for the best costume, holiday themed, and we would be grateful for your contribution.
We will also be raffling off a Traeger grill at the first girls basketball game tomorrow and the boys basketball game next Tuesday. Next, we are excited to announce that winter sports are starting off strong. Boys and girls wrestling kicked off their season with invitational meets. Swim team had a meet last week and did amazing. The girls and boys won by an incredible landslide. We are so excited to see their hard work for the rest of the season.
The rest of the winter sports start their games this week. Check out the OSAA website to follow upcoming games to cheer on our Foxes this season.
Our theater department just wrapped up a wonderful fall production of Mystery Maze. Auditions for our winter musical Newsies starts this week, and we hope to see you all at the performance. We are so proud of all our hardworking thespians.
Our clubs and activities at the high school are continuing their success through this winter season as well. Our clubs meet once a month on Tuesdays at the high school during AG and other times outside of school as well.
We want to congratulate our speech and debate team for their success at their tournament last weekend. Annabelle Nutman placed first in novice poetry, Jada Ridgway placed second in novice prose, Flocka Abduli placed third in novice prose, Miley Bradshaw placed third in novice ADS, Lily Proud placed finaled in open POI, Cordelia Bay finaled in open poetry, and Mia Claire Mickinson finaled in open radio.
We also want to remind you that our band has a holiday concert tomorrow at 7 p.m. The choir program has a performance at the Grotto in Portland this Wednesday and the Christmas concert next week on the 19th in the SHS auditorium. We hope you bring your friends and family to come support our talented students. We want to make sure everyone knows that we continue to post information about upcoming events and happenings at Silverton High School on our social media pages, the Silverton High School website, and on Parent Square as well.
We are excited about what's in store for the continuation of this school year, where our focus is to be great foxes who exemplify our fox values of respect, dignity, compassion, and inclusion.
Thank you everyone for all of your support and hard work to ensure that we have the best school year possible. And go Foxes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
ladies.
you.
Okay, and now we have a school report from Mark Twain Elementary. Melissa?
So I sent you our report in writing, but I thought it would be the best part. One of the things I talked to you about in the report is our Playworks program. I was lucky to inherit Mark Twain from Katie Beckett, who had already a lot of really great systems and programs and things at our school, and so we've just been able to continue it forward. And so we brought some of our junior Playworks coaches here tonight to tell you a little bit about the Playworks program. Daniel, is the last slide there? Well, they have a full presentation. We good?
I think he's working on it.
They're very excited. Well, how about the very first thing we were going to do is have you guys introduce yourselves. So why don't you start by doing that? So you want to start right here and work your way down? Your name? What grade? Oh, you have an order. Oh, yeah. Do it in the order.
Hello, my name is Clara Ike and I am a 5th grader. I am in Mrs. Heidi's class and I joined Playworks because I love helping out little kids.
Hi, my name is Emma and I am in 5th grade. My teacher is Mrs. Matska and I joined Playworks because I love playing with little kids.
Hi, I'm Brenna. I'm in 5th grade and in Miss Heidi's class. I joined Playworks because I like helping out and having fun.
My name is Addie Hedrich and I'm in 5th grade. I'm in Mrs. Matska's class and I wanted to be a Playworks coach this year at Mark Twain because I love encouraging kids and hugs.
Ready to tell them about Playworks a little bit? Yeah, so who wants to start?
Playworks is a program designed to improve the health and well-being of students by increasing opportunities for physical activity and safe, meaningful play.
It helps the school organize and support play at recess by providing choices for activities, teaching and playing with common rules and expectations to decrease conflict, and working to include all students in the games.
In schools where Playworks is used to organize and support recess, they experience an increase in the number of students who engage in play, an improvement in the way students and staff feel about school, and a big reduction in the amount of time missed learning due to resolve conflicts on the playground.
If a 5th grader wanted to be a junior coach, we had to apply to help support recess play at our school. We were selected because we have demonstrated safe, responsible, and respectful behavior at our recess.
As junior coaches, we attend low-lunch recesses to support games and activities. Each one of us is assigned as a team of 2 to 3 to support recess 1 day a week. To be able to coach, we need to continue to be a good role model and stay caught up in class.
On our assigned day, we leave a few minutes early and meet the classes that are coming out to recess and walk them down to the playground. During recess, we encourage students to join games, give them positive encouragement, and kick cards.
At the beginning of each month, we help teach the game of the month and then help students play and improve their skills all month long. We also make sure the game is being played safely and respectfully.
At the end of recess, we engage students in fun cheers and help them get lined up quickly and safely. Then make sure all the equipment is ready for the next class. Then we help them walk the students back up the hill to the school. We meet regularly as a team with our advisors, Mrs. Matska and Mr. Reeder, to learn about the upcoming games and activities for the month and to report back what is going well and problem solve things that we would like to improve.
As a team, we brainstorm ideas to address any challenges and make a plan for improvement or share the information with the staff at the school to help us with our goals.
So at this time, they would take any questions you have about Playworks and what the program is or what they like about it. If you have any. They did a pretty good job covering all their
What is your, any one of you, what is your favorite part of it?
Doing the cheers at the end.
Okay.
What's the game of the month this month?
It's blocker ball.
Oh, can you describe that? I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like Foursquare. It's 4 teams of 2. You each stand on one side of a square painted on the ground, and you try to hit a ball to the other side and get it through. Yeah, across the line.
Across the line, yeah.
Awesome.
Anything else with these guys?
I do. Do you guys go outside when it rains?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys got to go through the rain to get to the covered area down
Yeah.
there?
Yes.
Do you guys slip down the grass hill anymore? Or?
No.
Okay.
Because safe, responsible kids walk on the pavement.
You guys did great.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay, good job.
Yeah, yes, you're up, you're up.
Now I'm here with a different hat on. So, I'm here to talk to you about our services to our multilingual learners in the district. So as you know, as one of my hats is to also help support our ELD program, which serves our students, emerging bilingual students in our district. And kind of the premise of this presentation was that we haven't spent a lot of time in the last several years investing in like training and support, and so I've been asked to come up with kind of a long-term plan on how we can build capacity moving forward to support our English learners in Silverton. So of course our goal in ELD is to support English language development, but also to support academic success. And as you know, we all use language to learn. And when you're navigating 2 languages, that can be especially challenging. So our goal is to honor that experience and honor those gifts that our students have, but also make sure that our instruction supports their learning. And what we are happy to do in that process is the practices that support English learners also are good practices for all students in mastering academic content. So in our district, this is our program model. Every few years we are asked to submit a plan to the state of Oregon, and in that plan we outline how we plan on serving our English learners. And so in our district, for K-5 students, they receive 30 minutes 3 times a week of a pull-out program where they are taught by an English language development teacher. And then throughout the day, the model says that we are supposed to provide sheltered instruction, and what that basically means is that there's a number of strategies that they implement in core content in math and reading and science and social studies that make the content more accessible and help students communicate what they know about their learning. And 6-12, that's a class period that is like scheduled into their day, and again, it is expected that throughout the day, students have sheltered instruction as a part of their core content because, as we know, kids are learning and using English not just in their 30 minutes with their ELD teacher, but throughout the day. And we're all academic language learners. So what I've kind of come up with is really trying to clarify the roles and the responsibilities of how we support English learners. And there's, as you can see from our diagram here, it's a kind of a tri-prong support. It's what we do as a program with all the English language development teachers and us working in that instruction, but it's also what we do in our core instruction and our academic program and it's also what we do as a district to support our students and their families. So this is like really a famous graph in the ELD world, and it looks at the effectiveness of different ELD models. And so this is a Thomas and Collier study. It's been like established as a long time, kind of as like the proof of what practices move English language development forward for kids. And ideally, we would want a student to become proficient within 5 years. So you're wanting to make sure that whatever model you're using is maximizing that growth. Now, you also have to have the staffing, you also have to have the expertise to support the model that you use, and like, as you look up there, we have like dual immersion and like a bilingual program. Well, as you know, we probably don't have the staffing to support that program, so we need to make the best decision with the staffing that we have, and what we offer right now is that bottom line on the graph, which is a pull-out model, which is what we have. And as you can see, it helps for those first few years of English development, but then it loses its efficiency over time. The next best model on there is content-embedded ELD, where students are taught language within the school day and within the core content classes, where language and academic content are both prioritized in instruction. And so when you're looking at sheltered instruction is like the step between pull-out and content-based ELD. It's where we are providing those strategies that we know work really well to help support language development and help students navigate the academic language that they are needed to master their content. So I was doing some digging, and I looked on, I just wanted to make sure that I was in my brain keeping things straight, and what I was excited to see was that the Department of Education has a report on what is the most effective strategies and practices for English learners to make them most successful over time. And as you can see, what they have as best practice are all things that are included in sheltered instructional practice. So when we say on our program model that we do a pull-out model of 30 minutes of ELD with an ELD teacher, and we provide sheltered instruction, when it's implemented fully and when it's done well, it's really what we know is best practice for maximizing both language development and high levels of success in their academic pursuits. So why are we doing this? Why are we talking about it now? As you know, we have had some laser-like focus over the last few years, but it hasn't been on ELD. And I feel like there's some compelling evidence that would compel us to take a look at that. And that's kind of where this conversation has started. So what I do is I have some data to show you. What I like about it is that it really is a good visual on why this is important work and why we need to prioritize it. What's hard about the data that I'm going to show is the reality of it, and also that it's based on imperfect data. So when we're looking at the graphs that I'm going to show you in the next few minutes, know that if you're comparing apples to apples, you have to use the data points that are the best apples you have. Does that make sense? So what I have available to me to kind of look at data over time are our OSAS scores, which as a teacher, I know that they're just one piece of data on how our students are doing. I also know that not everyone takes them. I also know that not every student takes them with the way that I would want them to. So, but they are the piece of data that we have, and that's just like a common denominator. So I have some of those scores to share with you to kind of show why I feel like this is why we should be compelled to continue this work and to kind of recirculate back to it and focus our attention on it. So on the graphs that you have in your presentation, as you can see, if we look at our whole student population and success on some of these, I broke it down by grade level and academic area, both math and reading. Our general student population, there is a pretty discrepant gap between how our general population does and when we look at our special populations, which in our district we really focus on our students with disabilities and our English learners. And so this is, and this is kind of a trend that you are going to see throughout these graphs. So this is K-5 language arts, and the ELD graph is the red line at the bottom. Math, middle school, And this is long, like I looked at years, so it's not comparing the same group of students, it's comparing different groups of students at the same age. Does that make sense? Okay. Middle school math?
So the 23-24 data is predicted on there?
The 23-24 was last year's OSAS data. It was based on their end of the year
Got it.
summative assessment. And then high schools, I feel less reliable as far as, because we don't have as many, some students can meet their essential skills without having to take the test, so a lot of kids opt out of it, so it might not be as predictive as we need. But the point of the whole graph was not to be married to the numbers on there, but was to illustrate that this is a need that we have, that there's enough data to support the fact that we could improve on our services to English learners and our students with disabilities. And many of the same strategies that support language would support both populations, but they're actually great for all kids.
Were they, excuse me, were the zeros meaning they weren't tested? Or
Zeros would be 0% of the students that were tested at this grade level were proficient.
okay. Okay. I was wondering, do you have anything?
And it could be that they're such a small population. I mean, we're talking about 11th graders. There maybe could be that there were none, but I don't know that we've had a year where we haven't had any.
Do you have any educated guess on the dramatic jump consistently across these for the English learners from 2023 to 2024?
It's
It was
two
consistent
different groups
across.
of kids. It's two different groups of kids, so it's hard for me to know for sure.
All right.
As you're looking at all of the trend data, you can see that it kind of falls down and then is making a bit of a rebound up, generally speaking. So I would hate to, like, without more time, make a prediction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Incorrect.
That just looks to me like there's a small population.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not sure without those numbers.
Well, to go from 0 to, anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, if you have, let's say you have 3, you went from having 0 out of 3 to 1 out of 3, and that makes the graph jump.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was math. So as we're looking at this, and as we kind of have been reflecting on our program and on what we see in classrooms, really our teachers over the last, 4 years since I've been here, haven't had any focused training or support on the development of these strategies that are great for all kids but essential and critical for English learners. And so I've tried to kind of draft up a plan that would help us build some capacity over time. I know we're kind of in a rebuilding stage as a district, and so this plan obviously has to fit within that realm, but I also am kind of the squeaky wheel and not one that can kind of just keep going like, well, we need to get to this, we need to get to this. To me, those numbers tell us that that's a critical need, and that until our numbers look closer together, I'll still be squeaky about it. And so I've tried to develop a plan that would help us build capacity with our staff, because it's hard to expect something from our staff that we haven't provided. And then we've had a lot of change in our staff. We haven't had training. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with us as a leadership team and really focus and invest in our knowledge and understanding of what those strategies are and what we should be looking for when we're in classrooms, and how we can provide that instructional leadership in our buildings. And then obviously kind of cascade that out to our teaching staff and to our core content staff at all grade levels, and build it over time so that they have the training and the support and the strategies that they are being expected to implement in the classroom. And then I gave some district responsibilities as well, because it takes all of us. So, I think that's almost, yep. Do you guys have any questions for me? This is just more for you to say, like, this is the direction I'd like to see us go in, and that our team would like to move in to serve our kids. And I think that, I don't know that there's anyone who doesn't disagree that this is a need, and that this is something that's important to more equitable outcomes for all kids. So
Yep, I just want to reiterate, I totally believe that what's good for, especially, I like what you said at the very beginning, that we're all academic language learners, because we
Yes.
absolutely are. We can all improve on our academic language, and that's good for every single student.
Exactly. My favorite story, I've been trained, I'm a trainer in some of these strategies, and so I've done a lot of training, and where I was previously in, I trained much of our district in some of these strategies, and it was where my son went to school, and he is a native English speaker. He's an honors student, and I would often come home and see the work that he was doing that was out of his biology class. And his teacher had been trained and really realized the power of the strategies and how much more that he could provide support for kids and how much more he could get out of kids by incorporating some of these academic language scaffolds. And my son, I looked at him, I go, oh, what are you must be doing your biology. And he said, I've learned more about good writing and about being an academic writer from my biology teacher than I have from any of my English teachers. So I took that as both like a, oh, that's amazing, and a, oh my gosh. So we want to empower all teachers to be, because they all use language to teach our students. And so, and our kids all use language to have the information come in and to have their thoughts go out. So anything that we can do helps all students be more successful.
Was he using CM strategies?
Yeah.
CM is
It's amazing.
amazing. Yep.
Yeah. I'm a CM trainer. I'm trying to get us built up a little bit.
Love it.
I think a comment and a question. First, I just appreciate you taking the time to like really zero in on and focus on this. I think you could have a student where they're very, very gifted, but the language is such a challenge and a barrier where they're not able to fully express it. And so I think helping us stay focused on that. And then I guess my question is how much of technology is being like leveraged as we kind of press into some of these? Is that including the strategies? And if you can speak to that, great. If not,
So to kind of bridge the gap, we have purchased some technology support, but it doesn't take the place of just really great teaching. For students who come to us pretty proficient in their native first language, those technology pieces are really effective, because if you're already really proficient and you can understand the content at your level in your first language, then you can access those things. But even with the translation, if you know, like if you have had interrupted schooling, or if you're coming like with, you come in second grade and you have second grade in your first language, and then you are going forward in our system where the academic language becomes much more difficult and you haven't continued to develop those academic language skills in your first language, you kind of run into how far, you can only go as far as you can in your first language. So technology is important, and we have kind of tried to provide some of that to bridge the gap, but it doesn't take the place of just really solid teaching. Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got the master list here. I think it's where it matches your data.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's where you pulled your stuff from the state.
Oh, it was from like our report cards?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm looking at some of the results from like post-COVID on some of our test scores. So like we dropped between 2022 to 23, 24, there was a drop. But I guess my question is could that data is so hard to look at because it's really hard to like judge your sample size. So for example, the people that took the test, state goals like 94%. We went from 94.6, which was awesome, to last year to 83%. So we had lost 11% of the people that participated in the test. And that's just for English. And I'm kind of curious, that would throw off a lot of our data if like say the higher learners said, we don't want to take this test. So it's really hard to assess the data. Do you find some of the same difficulties?
Yes, and that's why I was hesitant to make even when I brought the graphs to our admin team, we all know how imperfect that data set is. And so to try to illustrate your point with data that is less than reliable, and it's like apples to oranges because you're looking at a different group of kids every year. What I wanted people to more focus on was that no matter what the data set is and maybe how reliable it is, there's enough of a gap here that it illustrates the need, even if it's imperfect data. It shows that over time, there has been a gap in support and service to populations in our district.
And the gap hasn't narrowed.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
was
Once in a blue moon. But that's
I'm
it.
kind of a data nerd. Like, I love making it into the graphs and stuff. And as I was looking, I was just, I mean, like, look at that one. It mirrors.
Yeah.
So when you say, oh, well, it went down for everyone. Yeah, it did. But then look at, like, it did. It's exactly a mirror of what our general population is too, which that doesn't excuse, you know, it's just mirrors that that's the trend we're seeing overall too.
Do English learners always, or categories, English learners from kindergarten all the way to their senior year, do they ever get taken out of that
Yeah.
category?
Like I said, our goal is that you can reach proficiency, and that proficiency doesn't mean you've mastered English and you've just like, but you've mastered it to the level where you can meaningfully participate in your grade level work. So we hope that the goal is to get kids out of ELD within 5 years. It's like we want to work ourselves out of a job, but that doesn't always happen. But that's the goal. So it's looking at the population that is currently identified and currently being served as an English learner.
And Melissa, my last question was, there was a chart a while back that had like 6 different options of maybe curriculum or processes to teach ELD. And you said we're at the lowest level one. I was trying to understand this chart. What, you know, it's like if we're utilizing this one, but it has the lowest amount of success, I'm just kind of curious, what are all these 6 different options and how does this work?
So a lot of them have to do with bilingual programs or programs where students receive at least part of their day in multiple languages, and we aren't most programs aren't staffed to be able to do that. You would need to have a pretty predominant bilingual staff.
Yeah, so like where I work, Josh, we do the one at the top, but it's very difficult for our schools to replicate that because of, like you said, the staffing situation, and you have to have a really high population of the other language speakers because they, you know, talk to each other. The English kids in Woodburn, it's Spanish or Russian, and so you've got to have the right amount of kids too.
So it's basically what
we're doing what we can.
Yeah,
we're doing what we can.
The red line is better than doing like nothing, right? So and it doesn't mean it's not great, because look at the growth at the beginning. If you look at those between first and third grade, the model, they all show pretty rapid. I mean, when done correctly, like they're all accelerated. It's just where they kind of start to taper off. So to me, that is just more evidence of why it's important that they don't just get ELD instruction, that they have language scaffolded throughout their day, because they don't just learn English 30 minutes a day with their ELD teacher. They use it and learn it all day long by the way that we teach them.
That's why I was asking that question earlier, because like, wait. They did well, then they did worse when they got to high school, but they drop off. Correct.
Like the number of them drop off?
Well, yeah.
Oh,
yes.
oh,
So-
like here, yes. It
I'll be a
works
little
really well at the
different.
beginning when you're in those first early
Yeah.
stages. And that would make sense. Like if I went and flew to another country and I was going to start being schooled, and I had like private tutoring where I had it in a small group and I was learning the language, I would take off in my growth in that area, but then there'd be a point where that wasn't enough for me to continue to accelerate my learning.
Plus those growth grades are heavy into language.
Content.
Yes, yeah, and as you
concepts
get older, that
and-
content, that academic language that you're expected to
Right.
master becomes much more complex.
Right.
But yes, I would expect that some of those students had graduated, you know, and we call those long, forever ELs now or something like that. But then the ones that stay, that don't test out, because the test is pretty hard, we call long-term ELs, and that's the tricky part, because then you're looking for the interventions that you think might work, because you're trying to figure out what the issue is.
Right. And as we know, you can't intervene your way out of the gaps in your core
good
instruction.
teaching,
And so the more that we can work to beef up our core instruction for all kids, the less we're gonna have to rely on problem solving what we need to do for small pockets of students.
Great presentation so far. I guess the question I have is, you know, the story, it kind of revolves around that one chart where I was kind of going like, well, it looks like there's a small data set, and then it gets revealed that, because there's not a lot of EL, English language learners in high school, because many have transferred out, and they've gone into the other group of
It depends. I mean, like
so
this
yeah,
year,
there we go. They've moved up to the all student, to the blue line, I guess, or
Well, yeah, so in that blue line
Yeah.
is the average of every student who's been tested,
Yes.
including
Yes.
our special
two
population.
subgroups.
But they're no longer in the special
Yes.
category. So
Yes.
I guess the story I'd like to, you know, how fast are we? How many kids are transitioning out? You know, how many?
It just depends every year. I mean, like,
Yeah.
Lori, I know you're here as in a different hat, but
Nurse, hard to be quiet.
yeah. So do you want to talk about how many kids are at each grade level at this moment and how it fluctuates in high school, like 9 through 12?
Yes, quite a bit. I have two sets of kids, really. I have newcomers, and then I have kids that have perhaps been in since kindergarten.
Oh.
Those kids generally are on third special ed as well.
A lot of our students become dual identified.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they've gone past their year, many do, not all, but many do have. There's sometimes some other factors, but also like if you're talking about reading and you're talking about like a reading disability, reading depends on language. So if you're, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard for me as an ELD person to rule out that those aren't also language deficits
Factor.
that weren't met earlier on in life.
Yeah.
And you also look at the numbers too, at the high school level, how it's changed. So I've been here since 20, I think. When I came, there were maybe 15-ish. No more than 20, now I'm at 40. It just,
Wow.
with regulations that change with the state as far as how we can exit kids too.
Yeah.
Our special ed
Yeah.
kids.
Because they have to pass the test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There used to be flexibility in how a student could demonstrate proficiency, and now it is pretty rigid. That is the gate to let them out of the program.
I appreciate the
Thank
focus.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks you guys for staying. You didn't have to, but I'm sorry. Yeah.
Honestly, I wanted the information.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Silver Falls Education Association. Ladies?
Thanks, you guys.
Good evening. Okay, hat's changed again. No more ELD teacher, now SFEA. So I'm happy to say that there are no new major issues to report, so that's a good thing. However, that does not mean that everything's okay. We're still feeling the significant effects of our staff being cut so drastically. And we continue to remind you of this to emphasize the importance of adequate staffing and the need to plan to increase staffing for next year. What we currently have is absolutely unsustainable. It's not good for our students, it's not the best learning environment for them, and it's not what's best for our teachers either. We are pleased that there will be a staffing report presented this evening so that everybody can see in detail how deeply schools have been impacted. And we're hopeful that there'll be collaborative discussions to problem solve staffing issues and determine how we can best serve our students next year. Any questions, anything?
No questions, just understand though.
Yeah,
Ditto.
I mean, it is good that there's no.
Nothing new.
That is
Yeah.
good, there's no new major fires, it's just our reality, everything is tied into our lack of staff right now.
Right.
And it's just, everybody is really feeling it.
I
really
don't
feeling it.
know of one school that doesn't feel it,
Mhm.
so.
I guess I have a question. You may not be able to answer this, but I know we've been talking quite a bit about what we can do to advocate for additional school funding. And we've heard some relatively positive news recently, but don't count your chickens, too soon. What are you hearing on your guys' end of your advocacy towards the state from the unions and whatnot to help maybe bolster the funding issues we have? Or are you guys?
Well, the news we got last week was good.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will alleviate the PERS conundrum, but we have other things that we have to address in addition to that. So that's the hard thing, even if, from our perspective, even if PERS is covered and taken care of, we still have gone through so much this year. What kind of position are we going to be in? What kind of decisions are we going to have to make in order to elevate staffing again?
And a lot of it that we are hearing too is just writing in or continuing to kind of make it known to lawmakers, like, this is a need and stuff, which they're getting it from so many other areas as well. I mean, there's needs everywhere, but just to continue to be that constant presence of, you know, we do need to adequately fund our schools.
There's no other way around it. We have to.
Thank you.
So. Anything else?
Yeah, there's. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you both.
Okay, now we have our first public comment. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand to be recognized by the board chair. If attending remotely, please use the raise hand feature within Zoom. For the record, please provide your name and relationship to the district. Please keep individual remarks to 3 minutes. If speaking as a representative on behalf of a group of 3 or more, comments will be extended to 5. A second public comment period will occur later in the meeting that is specific to discussion and action items only. The board will not hear complaints about individual district staff or board members during public comment. Please understand the board's primary role is to listen, and you likely will not receive an immediate response. Finally, remember we're all modeled the way of our students, and ask that you share your thoughts respectfully in accordance with the Silver Falls School District Board Decorum Agreement. If you would like to speak, please identify yourself. If you're on remote, virtually, then use the hand wave signal. Is there anybody online?
We have no hands raised online, and looks like the audience is
Okay. Okay.
pretty quiet.
Okay. Okay. We'll move on then. Administrator and staff reports. Superintendent report first. So,
Okay,
Kim?
good evening. Thanks for coming, you guys. Appreciate seeing you again. So, going to go through a couple updates tonight, and I too have some data to share from OSAS testing in the spring, and I did not dive into the focal groups because Melissa did dive in so heavily. So mine is just kind of general data. And if you ever want more specific data, I'm happy to sit down and talk data because I like it too. Not as much as Melissa, but I do like it. I don't know why. Oh, there it is. This is not the right one. Hey, Daniel, can you go? Oh, wow, that's fun.
Down.
Hey, Daniel, I need December.
I had a reader in first grade.
Nope, that's Tony.
And now I'm gone.
And now Tony's gone.
I remember the days when you had to close every one of those.
Yeah, I don't know what, we're just on hold for a second. I can actually see mine, so I'll just kind of look at mine and kind of tell you, because I've got December's up. So first thing I'm going to talk about, and I can just head into this without you seeing the slides, because we're all big people. We can manage until Daniel gets caught up with us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the governor's budget update. I'm going to do some state report card data, and then I'm going to talk about some admin priorities that we discussed. You're missing all the fun pictures, though. It's really sad. I sent it to him.
We're following.
Yeah.
You're good.
We got
Okay.
it.
So the governor released her budget the first week of December, first couple days, and she released a proposed budget of $11.36 billion, which does require approval from the legislature. And so there will be a long process of advocacy and lobbying and all the good things that COSA and OSBA and OEA and, a lot of different entities are, petitioning for extra funds for K-12 education. It's going to be a really active, long session in the legislature. We anticipate it going clear, as June. Yeah. And we are hopeful that we will have a finalized budget prior to June 30th when ours is supposed to be finalized by state law. This $11.36 billion is a $1.2 billion increase over the last biennium. and it includes about $85 million to assist districts with the PERS liabilities. So we talked, yay, thank you. Thanks, Daniel. We talked about the PERS liability in great detail. Kim talked about it last time. It will continue to come up as we get into budget season. That's about a $2.5 million liability for us. And while that small portion that the governor kicked in, we really appreciate that. It probably will not cover, districts that had a larger allocation like us. So our percentage of increase was about 9.5%. And so districts ranged anywhere from I think 1.4 was the lowest, Kim, and it capped out 16.
I think there's some districts.
Yeah, I think Gladstone's at 16. It's pretty high. So, this is a major concern for districts across the state. And, we had a large budget hit in this budget cycle. That one's not quite as large as this, but, we want the ability to build back. And the other thing I would impress upon you is that we have some facilities things that are going to become urgent, if they're not already urgent. The leaking roof at Mark Twain. I mean, some of the things that I see when I'm walking around the district in our budget, we're going to have to start planning for some of those facilities upgrades because we cannot rely on state funds to do that. So our current state school funding with this PERS liability for us does not allow us enough cushion to deal with those long-term facilities issues that I see in the district. So I did ask Jeff Alderman to get me a full roofing report on every building in the district so that we know where we stand. And some of those we have a pretty good idea on because they've already had issues or, leaking recently, like Mark Twain was leaking when it was heavy rain a couple weeks ago. But, the high school roof at some point, like part of the high school was built in '99. It's going to need to be re-roofed. This is a beautiful, expensive facility that we need to stay on top of. And so I think that looking at some of those things and being mindful of that is going to be important as we move forward. This is the highest level of current service, highest increase in current service level that we've seen in modern history, like the last probably 30 years. Yeah. The current service level model was built in the 90s after Measure 5 passed, and so it hasn't had an update in a long time. And so the governor's budget this year has a major shift in that and how we fund education, and so it provides a better base level funding for the general fund. So this isn't boutique funding. This is general. This goes into the state school fund. This doesn't include the student investment account, some of those other grant funds that we get, which are also super important. Any questions on that before
I guess I have one question,
Sure.
because just looking at the numbers between last biennium and this biennium, we've got, call it roughly a 10% increase, but we've had a lot of inflation over those couple of years as well. So it doesn't look to me to be a huge increase in service level when you take into account the increased expenses that we're also facing.
Yeah, that was my concern too, the overall amount, unless, so I was wondering how that can end up being much of a help to individual districts unless it's being redistributed. And some districts aren't gonna be getting as much, or how's that work? Because if the total package is like, instead of going up 10.
I think it's 11, but yeah.
Close, yeah. But that's over, excuse me, that's over 2 years, and wages and spending costs have gone up over that. So
Yeah, I think we did have, I think it's in the state, I think staffing levels have increased, and so it is a lot more expensive to run a school district now. The staffing allocation is just much higher for districts.
So I guess I'm just wondering how much positive impact we're gonna feel from this.
Yeah, in terms of being able to add back
treading
staff.
water feel than.
Yeah.
Coupled with what they just mentioned, does this get us there, or is this just a nice it's a help because it helps with inflation and everything costs more now, but does this adequately fund us to where we need to be? That's the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kim and I will run a preliminary budget at 11.36 and kind of see where we're at based on our current staffing levels, and then we'll do some other, some other visualizations to see, and try and see what we really need to get out of the woods. And I mean, this is just the baseline, right? So we haven't done any advocacy at the legislature. I mean, we haven't gone in and testified, like I volunteered to testify. I don't know if I'm experienced enough. I might get trumped by someone who has more experience, but working on those state levels to try and really impress upon the legislature that that's the baseline. We're not going to be able to add a bunch of things back at that baseline. Is my guess, but I don't know for sure. And so that's Kim and I's next big project, and Tony and Brandon to start. And we got to talk about SPED and ELD and all those focal groups that we just talked about that we need better support for, and and try to move forward in a way that's prudent, that protects our funds and protects our facilities, but also gives some relief to our staff where they're really hurting, because we know that. We know that staffing is stretched thin across the district. And Tony's presentation will go, you're getting so much data tonight, sorry, all in one lump.
Yeah, it's a data, I guess, thanks for this, and I guess thanks for Owen for that question, because you look at it and you go, oh, it went up 10%, that's great. But that's over 2 years, so that's 5%.
Mm-hmm.
5% 1 year, 5% the next year. So is that, I guess I'd like to know what the average cost of staffing has it over those two, is it just, I think it's just treading water. That's where my gut says we're just treading water here.
Yeah, one of the good things about how they're going to fund education is they are going to allow us to do a 49-51 split. So it'll be 49 in the first year and 51 the second year, which does allow you to, the cost of living increase for the second year. So that's an improvement as well.
Yeah.
So.
Does this preliminary budget talk about like some of the other funds, like high-cost disability reimbursement or anything like that? Is there a lot added to that?
Yeah, we are still talking about that at the state level. So when we were at COSA last week, Krista Parent, I talked to her about that. And what she said was in their meeting with the governor, there was a lot of talk about this current service level and the 11.36 in PERS, but they didn't get very far into the SPED conversation. So I think that is forthcoming. We are advocating for the SPED cap to go from 11 to 15%, which would be really good. And we're asking, we're going to petition them for full funding for high-cost disability, which is at about 40 cents on the dollar right now. So, So if we spend, $1,000, the state only reimburses us $400 for high-cost disability, and so that's a really expensive endeavor and complicated. So. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. Kim, you want to add anything to that?
I believe you've covered it. It's
it
feels no, absolutely not. It feels like really good news. It definitely is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, right.
It's not it's not adequate yet. I mean, to put it bluntly, it is not adequate yet. Yeah. So. Absolutely, we are so thankful for everything that can be done, but to truly serve students in the manner that they need to be to move those dials, especially our populations that have other barriers, we're going to continue to work. So, yep. But the budget processes, we starting to really look at where is that focus and where will students see the most benefit, and making sure those priorities are met and our spending is aligned with our plans.
So some state report card highlights. These just came out in November, and there's some pretty exciting things on here. So regular K-5 attenders, those increased 6% to almost 72%, which is higher than the state average of 66%. Grades 6 through 8 were up 2.8%, and grades 9 through 12 were up 4.9%. And that is a lot in 1 year. So when I was in a previous district, we were part of a cohort that had 16 school districts in it, and the highest in that group was 10%. So this is a really good rate of return for the attendance efforts that our administrators and teachers and kids have made.
Can you remind me again, is there a cutoff of like the time for the regular attenders? So is it like, it's in the morning, right? So if you come in after that time, and maybe still make up 70% of the day?
Yeah, I think, is it 10, Debbie?
I can't.
If they make I think if they make 5 periods, Derek, but I'll
Okay.
double check it.
I couldn't remember what that cutoff time was.
I'll send you the what constitutes a regular attender. It's 90% of the time, and and there's a date configuration from May to October that it's just it's really.
Sorry, I mean,
how they figure it is not easy to manage, but I'll send that to you guys so you can see. Graduation rates are embargoed until January, so if I gave you graduation dates on here right now, it would be from the previous year, so we're not allowed to release those just yet. 9th grade on track is at 93%, which is a 2% decrease, but it's still 8% above the state average. So 9th grade on track is a really important indicator of whether students will graduate on time. It's probably the most important indicator. And being on track to graduate at the end of 9th grade means that you have 6 credits, because that's a fourth of what the state requires. The district did not meet in the participation goals for state testing in any category. So Josh mentioned that earlier. So OSAS, which is the state test that we take in the spring, has an opt-out clause. And so we've had quite a few families opt out. And I think that OSAS is just one measure, right, of whether you have student growth. So we track other things, but a couple of the things that we use to track student growth, we weren't able to purchase because we didn't have the funds for it. So we used to use STAR testing at K-5, which has an early literacy component, which would test growth for grades K2, and a reading component. And while we use DIBELS for reading, it's still, DIBELS is a fluency, and it tests a little bit different things than STAR does. So I think, in my opinion, it would be good if one of our budget add-ins was STAR for K-5 again next year. And it would be about $21,000 add-in for next year. And that's how tight our budget was this year, right? Like that, we just didn't have that. So, we'll try and add some of those things back in that help kids, but it's better to have more data points than less. And OSAS, I mean, for teachers, OSAS is not the most user-friendly assessment to track student growth and performance in the classroom, because it happens at the end of the year, and then teachers don't see the data until, well, we got it in November. And they see it a little earlier than we do. They can see trend data and classroom data earlier than the final, results that come out. But still, some teachers call it an educational autopsy, because it's kind of like after the fact. So I think that, there's some other data points we could use for sure.
Kim, can you elaborate, or maybe you can't? I'm usually pretty good at understanding people's motivations, but why are people opting out of the testing?
I've read articles on this.
Sure.
I think anything that has to do with the computer, parents are saying no, and I don't think that's going to get better in terms of this testing thing. I think that
they're just doing it because they can, and
I think people have been complaining for years and years about the testing. They don't like it, and they're doing what they can. Sure. I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and it's a really long test, and so like if you take the STAR reading test at K-5, it's 15-20 minutes. Mm-hmm. OSAS is like days. Like it takes the kids so long to take it. Right. It's really, and it's labor intensive to give. Like it's not necessarily a fun thing.
And some of the kids don't do well during it. It's kind of traumatic for some of them.
Yeah, when the first year I gave it as a teacher, I had a couple of kids that just said, hey, I'm done. They do 2 minutes in, they click C all the way through.
Or they just click through.
Yeah, he just clicked through it. He told me, because I answered C for everything, and I said, well, you probably got 25% of them right then. Maybe.
Is Department of Ed looking at that at all? Because that's been a common thread for quite a few years now. on that and the amount of class time that it takes to give these. And then,
Yeah.
and in the day when a super high percentage of the kids were taking them, you could maybe find some justifications, but now with so many not, that even exasperates that whole situation of lost class time.
Yeah, this testing measure is a federal requirement.
Oh.
So so it's required by the feds. So, you know, we could try and get a waiver. You know, we have had a waiver in the past during the COVID, during the pandemic. But I think that, you know, I think at some point, you know, superintendents are talking to ODE about other growth measures. Like, what are we using in our buildings to track student growth and to tell if they're making progress, or to tell if we need to do remediation or an enrichment activity. Like, what does this student need to be successful? Like, each student has different needs. And so, you know, what a teacher finds useful in their classroom isn't always what ODE would find as something they could report to the federal government. I mean, some of the most effective measures I've seen for whether kids can read is a decodable reader, when kids are sitting there reading and tracking and you can tell that they can read. You know, I mean, that's the ultimate measure of whether your lesson on the W sound just made sense to these kids, and they can go through this book that has elements of that in it and read. So I think, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can measure growth, and I think this is just one area. I'm going to show it to you. I think it's more important, those daily formative things that teachers do in their classroom every day to really check in on kids, see how they're doing, make sure they understand. I think those are probably a better indicator of whether we're successful or not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always, I see the value in, you know, a standardized test that all the kids take in all the country and we can measure, but when I hear about this day-long
Oh, it's not just day, it's days.
days, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I misspoke. Days. I mean, it goes on. That just seems a little. That's not the intention when I hear of a standardized test. It's like, you know. So.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving the in-depth explanation of that.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. No problem. So we're going to go through some of these highlights real quick. I'm going to go back to my version so I can see it better. So this is our our 3-5 language arts. And it shows a slight downward trend for the district. So we were at like 52-ish% in 21-22. Then we dropped to 51, and now we're right at 50. And this is our entire population that took the OSAS in the spring. So that's down a couple points. And this is similar. This is 6-8 language arts. So we were at about 51%, then we went to 50, and now we're at about 48%. So a little bit of a downward trend here.
And that's students that are passing this assessment?
That are proficient, so
Proficient.
yeah, that are showing proficiency, yes. And the language arts test is a full test, comprehensive test on reading, writing, research, and listening. So it's got a listening component. This is 11th grade language arts, and you can see our figures that are in the blue. So we had a rough year in 21-22, and I noticed that on Melissa's. Oops, I didn't change yours. I changed mine. And then we bumped way up to about 65%, and then we're back down to about 52%. And then this is our math. So 3-5 math. So grades K through 2 don't take this exam. So this is our math score. And we're looking pretty good in math. We're at about 41.5%. And we're far above the state average in math. So this looks really good to me, the math does. 6-8 kind of holding their own. They went down just a touch, but still above. What was that? But still above. Thanks, Debbie. I can't see. I'm having such a hard time with my vision. Sorry. 6-8 in math is right around 35%, but still higher than the state average. And then we've got 11th grade math. And this shows we're just about even with the state this year at 20%. a little bit lower than the state average. This is quite a downward trend here. Okay, so that is the math and language arts data. What questions do you have about any of that?
I have quite a few.
Okay, I'm ready.
It's like, again, it's trying to assess data. Like, okay, well, like for example, that massive drop off in math from 1 year. You know, for me, that should be alarming, but we also need to take things into context that things last year were not so great. How much did that trickle down to the students, to the staff? But to see that every year we've had a couple decrease in our reading and our decrease. Math, there was some improvement, but I'm like, well, weren't we putting all this work into curriculum and we're doing all these things, yet the results say, you know, so I don't really know how to look at it. So my point is about testing, you know. Well, if this is what everybody in the country does and the federal government recommends it, well, I want to know how we're doing compared to New Hampshire or Florida or Texas. Oregon, the last time I checked, we're like 48, 49 out of 50. I'm like, well, why are we not getting, I'm like, that's how my brain processes stuff. So I'm like, and I don't want to get away from testing because it's difficult or hard or stressful, because life could be difficult, hard, and stressful. You just don't get it like, I don't feel like I can do it today. Well, somebody needs to be at the store. Somebody needs to go to the bank so you can turn your money in. Like, so I'm wrapping my head around some of these numbers, and I just don't quite understand why we're tailing off unless it's a symptom of maybe there's been unhealth in the district and that's bleeding down to staff and students. So I'm just trying to figure it out from my end, because as a board member, I'm like, well, this isn't like something I'm pumped about, because any of the goals that we're setting, we're not really hitting. When the people are coming up saying, hey, we're gonna go do this, and we're not doing it, I'm kind of want to know why. And I don't think it's harsh. I literally just want to understand how we can improve. Now, granted, our finances, losing teachers, like none of that is going to be a great way for us to help, especially with the massive drop off. So I'm really curious if our numbers don't drop off like they did. That shows me what an amazing staff we have with so little that they've got. You know what I mean?
Oh, this year, yeah.
This next round, next year's report card, if it's the same, like, holy crap, we have some impressive people.
Yeah, we do have some.
Is it that we just had that junior class, like, hey guys, don't pay attention to this test doesn't matter, and everybody takes the test? It's really hard to know.
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play. So we removed the essential skills requirement for several years from the high school, which initially, essential skills, the kids could satisfy it by passing the OSAS test. And so there was less buy-in for high school kids to pass the test because they didn't have to have the essential skills component to graduate for a couple of years.
What year was that?
I think that went out in 2020 when COVID hit. I think they removed it that spring with our seniors that spring. And then it's supposed to come back in. So, I mean, it's going to cycle back in. So I think that in reality, like, some kids are like, well, like, you know, maybe I don't need that because I don't need to show that I have that skill, even though I think there is a high level of opt-out in the district. I would like to see people, you know, take this test so that we can kind of see where we're at, and really, you know, I'm going to try and get the participation rate up, but I do think it's going to be difficult with what Jennifer shared earlier. I will say that, you know, I would anticipate that our scores do not go up this year, probably, if I had to make a guess, because our staff is so stressed and they're so stretched so thin. And like, so when you look at what moves the needle, like especially for K2 literacy, early literacy, which is something I specialize in, what moves the needle is what interventions do you provide for kids? And I mean, what are you pre-teaching? What are you reteaching? Where, you know, what reading group are they going to? What kind of instruction are they getting? And I think that some of our intervention systems have been interrupted because our staffing levels are low. So when these guys look out and they try to find somebody to help a student, like we have less staffing. But I mean, we also have to figure out a way to manage that and to create new systems and I think when Melissa said that your core instruction, you cannot intervene your way out of, core instruction that isn't strong. So we have to really focus on our core, get that really strong, and then build some systems in place that will help kids that need intervention. So that was a long answer to that question. Sorry.
And I wanted to add, just from the data standpoint, as I look at this from kind of a different lens, that's that really we're talking looking at these charts. The ones that jump out are the junior class numbers, and we've got a single year that shows a significant jump for one class and then a decrease for the next. But yet if you look at the spread for that 3-year span, we had a 22-point increase in ELA for that junior test and a 7-point increase in math, which far exceeds the state change. So did we have an anomaly class? Did we have a lot of opt-outs of that 1 year? If you get a subset of students that opt out in mass, it is going to create data. So I think looking at longer trend data instead of single data jumps, yes, it does seem alarming, but honestly, a 22-point jump in English language arts for juniors over 2 years, that's from 30 to 52. I think we can,
if you average that.
And the math is also similar.
the math is extremely similar. So compared to our state numbers, I kind of feel like I would look at that and go, okay, what's that anomaly? Just like we do in our budget. I look back and say, okay, 2 years ago, why did we spend so much on X? Well, we had a boiler go out. So, that's an anomaly that I take out of my trend data when I'm trying to forecast for things. So not to say that, there aren't peaks and valleys in things, but that being a single grade, I think kind of sometimes can also do it. So
Yeah, to me, that's what explains a lot too. It's like it's apples to oranges because it's a different group of kids every year, and it's not a factory. The teachers may do similar things every year, but the inputs are different. And I agree with Kim's analysis. Like overall, we're trending up in those two areas.
the math,
Yeah.
ELA is kind of,
And that's kind of what I see. It's hard to, all the data, it's hard to really tease out what's going on with all this data. There's lots of opt-outs on the testing, and we're seeing that. But there's also, past 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot of people take their kids out for private schools. It takes more income if you're going to go to private schools. And that generally is, more stable. Higher income families who can do this, have more stable home lives, can do that. There's probably some of your higher achievers maybe in private schools that would have stayed here and taken the test. So that's just theories.
Well, and I
ideas,
guess
but,
that more educated families, the opt-out families are going to be the ones who their kids are probably would have done better because they have the knowledge that they know they can opt their kid out.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would take a lot of analysis to really tease it out, but we don't have the manpower.
And I think you should. I think you should take a comment from a teacher out there that wants to.
Yeah, someone's jumping up and down.
Yeah, jump up and tell us what.
It's like, oh, it's so hard. So, teaching 5th grade, we have to give 3 tests: English, math, and science. It's a month-long process. It's not days. It's a month of testing, and our kids are exhausted by the end of it. Opt out. We have a lot of SPED opting out because it's not the most appropriate measure for them. It's very stressful for our SPED kids, especially when you have a reading test where you can't read it to them. We can't give them, there's certain supports they can have, but they're like, I don't know this word. The only thing I can say is try your best.
Yep.
Yeah.
I cannot give them any help. All my anchor charts, all of the scaffolds we give them throughout the whole year are gone. And so for SPED, it's really hard. So we do have a lot of our SPED opting out. And then the last few years, we've just also seen with students, like I've literally had students say, I don't want to take it. I'm going to tell my parents to opt me out. And the parents are like, okay. I'm like, there's no reason for you to opt out. You can do it, but we just have kind of a lack of apathy, so to speak, of like kids
Yeah, we also talked about our superintendent group. We talked about the alignment between like the state test and like STAR or DIBELS. And a lot of times, like the data that we're seeing in STAR and DIBELS doesn't necessarily match what comes out in OSAS. And so there are parts of OSAS that we're spending so much time on reading and writing that maybe we didn't hit that research part hard enough, or maybe we didn't hit the listening and speaking part hard enough. So, I mean, that can cause your score to go way down, even though you're completely proficient in reading. Like you can take those strands out of OSAS and you can tell, like we could do a report on her class and we could show you which students were and what areas we needed to hit again. So, I mean, you could take it. I mean, you can dive into the strand data. It's really interesting. Dan Farley's happy to come help us if we ever want him to from ODE.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are things that you could do, but I do think that you have quite a bit of opt-out going on based on our participation rate, which ODE is going to want us to work on.
I guess, I just wish there was.
And COVID.
We're not that far from we're still feeling the effects of.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure, especially at certain grades,
Yeah.
because of developmental.
As far as ALPA is concerned, we don't have an opt-out feature. So it's, even if you're not having services, we don't have that opt-out feature.
What's an opt-out feature?
Meaning parent waive that says you do not have, my child will not take this test.
So
Like
all this percentage ELD.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, different test, yeah.
It's hard when I hear, Barbie used to tell me, Robert Frost about, I would, to the layman and to most average person, when you think of a test to see how the kids are doing, you just think of a 15-minute test if they can do math or some reading, and it's a snapshot of the building, the district, the state. It's not meant to be granular, and yet I hear about these grueling month-long things, and I would have these talks with her. I'd be looking at her like, what are you talking? I just want to know. I just want a snapshot when I hear of this statewide testing, and I don't know why it's this ordeal. And so when I hear about that in your stories and my wife's stories, and I hear about kids, parents wanting to opt their kids out, I'm like, yeah, I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
And like in the K-5 plan, we would love to see, or this 3-5, like STAR or something come back.
Yeah.
That was, you could do it one session, but we often would break it up into 2 half-hours sessions. But we would give it multiple times, and kids could actually see their growth.
Yeah.
So it wasn't you have to reach this score. It was, how much did you grow from your last test? We don't see that on the state assessment. We can't show them growth because we don't get it right away, and we don't have their last year's scores. So seeing like the kids actually being able to take a test and see their growth from one test to the next is a lot more powerful for them than what we currently have.
Well, it's I would just say if you have a test that the kids don't want to take, you got a problem. You just start right there.
I don't think there's any test like it.
Yeah, I was just.
Well, but I mean, but this month-long thing where you the teacher's gotta cover up everything in the room, and
Oh yeah, you come in my classroom. There's
I know I've heard this, and I just
cover up things, and then it throws kids off because your classroom was Zoom.
yeah, and I go back to when I was a kid, monitor, and you just you just fill the Scantron and you take a test. Okay, I can read, I can do math, and that's the assumption that's ingrained in me when I hear about a state test comparing buildings to buildings and states and districts and all that. And it's not.
This has been some really good discussion, but we
Yeah,
probably need
thanks,
to let
yeah.
Kim keep going here. We got quite a
Probably.
big agenda tonight. So.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Thanks, Phil.
All right. So we did I'm going to move on to our administrative priorities for the year. So in our admin team, that's my team at work right there doing sticky notes and charts and all that. They love that. We talked about, because we have so much going on in the district and there's so many areas that, we're pulled a lot of different ways, and we wanted to really be able to focus in on 3 areas that we thought would make a significant difference for kids and staff. And so we had behavior framework and a code of conduct that was reconfigured in 21-22. And so we would like to finish that project up and really have a consistent framework that is across all buildings. So they identified that. Then they also identified a multi-tiered system of support. So that is a multi-tiered system of support that helps student growth across the district. So what do students need to succeed? What interventions are we providing? Like what can we do to alter behavior, support plans, all these different things. And that's a really in-depth project, but we've already been working on a part of that through the Oregon RTI grant. And so that's really great work, and we would like to continue that. And then, even though I told you I wasn't going to work on a strategic plan right now, my admin team really thinks that we need a strategic plan. And so I think that we should try and start doing the communication and the work around that this spring, because I think what happens if we don't have one is that we're unfocused and we lose focus, and I think we're seeing that a little bit as a team. Like, what draws us back together, what can we accomplish, and what systems can we put in, and how do we make that all work together so that there's a synergy in the district around systems that support kids and help student growth and help staff morale and different things. And so we're talking about a strategic plan process for next year.
Hey, Kim, about
Yeah.
that, just question regarding it. Like, we could literally adopt the old one and use that, right?
We could, except the old one has two components on it that are really defunct. One is the bond, and then the other is guaranteed viable curriculum.
So those things, but my concern is how much time and effort would we spend in reinventing the wheel is only my concern.
I think you're just refining the wheel, maybe. I don't think you need to completely reinvent it. I think that some of these things will naturally come back up and be things that we want to work on, like SEL. That was one of our components. One of our components in our strategic plan is to provide a welcoming, safe environment that, you know, is conducive to learning and helps kids feel really excited about coming to school. And I think some of those long-range facilities, things that we've talked about, back up that section of our current strategic plan that's set to expire at the end of the month. So I think this will be probably, you know, I don't think it's going to be super expensive. I don't think, I think we could probably wrap it into part of that grant process that we're doing for integrated planning with ODE. That might be a way to do both those things at the same time and create this cohesive plan that is, you know, encompasses all those different areas that we're trying to do in the district.
So you're seeing it as an opportunity?
I do see it as an opportunity, and I think, I really like it here, and I think that having a strategic plan helps us all in the district have a common focus, and I think it's a good thing for me as the superintendent to have that in place, because I think it helps move us forward and shows my commitment to the district, not as just an interim superintendent, but as a full-time, a full-time superintendent that is really committed to the district and has shown that over and over again by the systems and processes and work that we complete as a team. So I think that's a great thing to do. You can sleep on it.
To me, I think that if you're on board and the administrative team's on board, who are we to complain?
Yeah, this is all their work. I didn't actually steer this at all. I just turned them loose, and they talked, I had them do an exercise, and that's what they came up with, and they did a really good job. They were very serious about it. There was a lot of engagement, a lot of discussion about how we finalize some of these projects and start using them and start finishing things and making sure that we have integrity and fidelity about what we implement in the district that will help kids. So they were very serious about it, which I love.
I think it's a good idea. I think it gives the district like a common vision of we're all focusing in one direction. I think now that we have some stabilization, I think for us as a board, having a common working language vision for everyone to kind of wrap their minds around, I think it's, if everybody's up for it, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think the admin team's all up for it, so if you guys are up for it.
If we do it, it has to be the cover photo. Kim's the only one looking at the camera.
Kim's smiling, yeah. She looks so happy. She's got her sticky note. She's doing her stuff.
Doing my job.
Doing her job. And then that's my final slide on this one. I want to go back one more slide real quick and show you this. That slide is a picture that Elise took at Victor Point. And so that is how beautiful it is here.
Yep.
I just want y'all to know that is a local picture. Okay, so I think I'm still up.
Yes, you are.
SIA report, Daniel, please.
Yeah, here we
I'll
go.
try and be faster on this one. Oh gosh, why is it doing that again?
Oh, it's our
Sorry.
fault, not yours.
Yeah, this one was, not this one, but the next couple, like the format seemed weird coming through.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it cut some things off. Where is Daniel when he's doing these things? Is he hiding in the back? So I'll give you a brief overview. So the student investment account is the large grant through the Oregon Department of Education. It's a state grant, and it is designed for certain things in the district, well-rounded education. There we go. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Daniel. You're the best. Okay. And so we are required by ODE to give an annual report each year of how we're doing in our work on the student investment account, what we use these funds for. It's part of our accountability measures with ODE. And so,
I apologize. Is me presenting because it couldn't come up, so I can move it as
okay,
you're ready.
next slide, Ms. Dowd.
Oops. Give me just a moment.
Is it being ornery to you?
Yeah.
Where is it? There we go. So SIA recipients are required by statute to track our own progress and review it and present it to the board. ODE's annual report this year consists of 3 narrative questions and progress marker ratings. This is a little bit hard for me to do because I haven't been in the district very long. So this is probably not the best report I'm ever going to give on this. I bet next year looks better, but we'll muddle through here. We can go to the next slide. So this is question number 1. So as you review your progress markers and overall reflection on plan implementation, how do you see your progress contributing to the outcomes and strategies in your plan and longitudinal growth target local option metrics? So we have noticeable progress in our efforts to increase overall student attendance, and our regular rate of attenders increased to 71.8%. We would attribute this success to an ongoing effort from counselors, teachers, staff, and administrators to provide a safe and welcome space for families, as well as improved efforts to communicate with students and families about the importance of attendance. We have a stellar alternative school. You guys already know that. Therapeutic space where kids come and they feel welcome and loved, and that's a really great way to increase attendance. We also provided additional counselors, a social worker, alternative education specialists, and those help prioritize our students who need additional support. This connection with students is really important and encourages them to come into the building, which is really essential. And it didn't ask me to comment on every marker. I just chose attendance because we had an increase in attendance, and I would like to work on that for next year even more. So that will be an area of focus for me in year 2. In reading proficiency levels, or ELA levels, we showed a slightly declining statistic. And as Melissa alluded to earlier, this probably indicates that we need to focus on our focal groups a little bit more. So English learners and students with disabilities. Okay, so that was question number 1. Any thoughts or questions on that?
Focus on attendance. I like that.
Yeah, attendance is good. That's one of ODE's big, big ticket items for this year and next. And I think that, we saw really good gains in that cohort I was in last year. And I'll actually share that data with you by email so you can see that, what that cohort did. It was pretty interesting. So where have we experienced barriers, challenges, or impediments to progress towards your outcomes and strategies in your plan? And what could you use support with? Our teachers spent considerable time, and I mean like 4 years worth of time, creating unit and projection maps based on state standards. But it's been a little bit difficult when I go into the district and when I talk to teachers, when I talk to administrators, teachers are using a wide variety of core resources to hit those standards. So to me, it feels like a little bit disjointed, in that some people are using different resources, so it feels kind of confusing to me a little bit. And that's just my observation. I think they're doing really amazing work in the classroom, but I think that if we provided them with a better tool for that K-2 instruction, that, is like UFly, maybe like, and provide some extra training for them, I think they would knock it out of the park with that, because they're already doing a lot of those strategies, but they really haven't had as much training as they should have had. And so I think that's an area where we need to provide some professional development and some support for them so that they can continue to work in that area, because building that foundation for early literacy is really key to our 3rd grade reading proficiency scores. The RTI group that we're in, we're working really hard with. That's a district-wide group. There's about, probably 12 of us in there. And it's principals, administrators, teachers, you name it. And they're working on what is our core curriculum and what is our strategy at K2, and what intervention strategies are we going to use. So we talked about that as part of that MTSS RTI work, where we're providing those supports for students. So I think that while they wanted to know where I thought this was the one thing I could think of that would really move the district forward. And then question number 3.
What's an RTI group?
Response to intervention or instruction.
You guys have so many acronyms, I'm trying to keep.
I'm sorry, I know. RTI and MTSS are kind of related.
I mean,
They're
the next
like
one,
family.
I don't know what LPG is, PLOM.
I should make you guys a cheat sheet.
I'm not very smart, I apologize.
No.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Josh. I quit talking in my educator lingo. So the 3rd question was review actual metric rates compared to previously created longitudinal data and metrics, and share reflection on progress. Describe how activities support progress towards targets, and if shifts in strategy and implementation are planned for future based on that current progress. So, it's just like an essential step forward for us to finalize and complete a multi-tiered system of support for students. Our outcomes illustrate the need for this system, but this is an area of the district where we haven't fully finished that. We have portions of it in place, but it's not a complete comprehensive system. Providing structured interventions for students that support core instruction would enhance our outcomes in 3rd grade. And I already talked about this a little bit, which declined slightly last year. I talk about the behavior framework and the code of conduct that was started in 2021. That framework's important because it talks about restorative practices and how we help students get along and how we help them manage their big emotions sometimes, and how we help monitor their behavior, their attendance, and their grades, so that's part of the 9th grade on track feature, so that you don't let anybody get too far down in the weeds before you pull them back up and say, hey, your attendance is at 60%. So really paying really close attention to those parameters for 9th grade on track. We're still well above the state average, but we showed a slightly declining number in that area. So I think that having a high quality MTSS and behavior framework would provide extra consistency and support that students need. And then I included the outcomes and the strategies for you to review. Any questions? Lots of data. Sorry, friends.
As long as there's not a test later.
No
I'm
test
gonna
for
opt
you,
out.
Phil.
Yeah, I'll opt out.
I'll write one up for next time.
Just real quick, Kim, in those
Yeah.
outcome identifiers for that thing, what are these A, B, C, D categories? I don't.
Yeah, so we have 4 main areas, and for instance, one of the outcomes is an increase in 3rd grade reading proficiency, one is an increase in attendance. And so I can send you those if you want to look at them.
I see, it's supposed to be
So,
one long.
Yeah, it
Got
is
it.
supposed to be one
Okay,
long
that
thing.
makes
So
sense.
if you look on page 2 of 3, it talks about a 90% graduation rate. Students are on track to graduate.
It's kind of cool. It shows how it's funded. I actually, it's a cool
So,
chart.
yeah, so those all tie in, each of those, you know, A is our 90% graduation rate, and then A 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are how we're gonna do those. And then as you keep going through here, there's a teeny tiny, well, it's an 11 by 17 tabloid thing, but it talks about what we spent on each of those. It's actually page 181 in the agenda report, but it goes in, then we have to report for each one of those strategies, how much of the 3 different grants we used for each of those pieces. So that's the financial report, squeezed onto a tabloid paper. I did bring some tonight printed if people would like them, because even on ledger size paper, it's teeny tiny.
Yeah,
So-
I prefer it printed. Yeah. But it does show you all those different areas.
And then the next one, the progress report, like those different colors, like medium, like categories, low, medium. Is that explanatory in here? I can dig through what they mean?
Well, this is just like you're kind of grading yourself
Okay.
on what you think, you know, where you think you are on that. And on some of these, you know, medium was kind of a normal answer, but a couple of them were, I thought, a little bit lower than last year.
And is this supposed to be like one long chart too?
Again,
Oh,
yes, one long chart, yeah.
Perfect. So I could literally just print it off, cut them.
Yeah, you could, yeah, if
Yep.
you really wanted to dive into it and see what we're tracking our progress on, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? What?
No. Okay.
Okay. I think we're on to
Good.
Tony.
We'll let Tony on the staffing report.
All right, thank you, members of the board. Glad to be here with you this evening. Okay, thank you, and clicker?
Oh, clicker. Sorry, Tony.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so a question that I often hear when I'm out and about in the schools is, or not a question, but a comment more, is that I often hear, that, you know, it looks so different this year from last year. And that's, you know, that goes without saying, right? And what I wanted to do in this report was provide just one way of quantifying that. So before I start, I want to mention what this report is as well as what it isn't. So this is a staffing report based on same data from 23-24 in the current school year. However, there's a few things it's not. It's not a staff reduction report. So it's not a report of the actual layoffs that we've had. And I can explain that a little bit more as we continue down it, because there's different ways of describing what a layoff is. For instance, they tend to be underreported when you look at it from the number of people that actually received reduction notices, because you have a lot of people that may have retired or resigned or received promotions, right? So, so much of this is what's in the definition that you have. It's also not a budget report. There will be some of these cases where some people have pointed out, well, the numbers seem off a little bit, and particularly when you get to the school level data, and that's because this is a report that's based from an HR perspective of the people we see and we're working with every day. So a good example is there's one school, and it shows up really in this one school because it's a smaller school, where we happen to have 2 people the day that the data was pulled for the 23-24 school year. Because again, we're taking a snapshot of December 3rd of 24 with what we had December 3rd of 25 or 24. So right now versus the same date last year. And at this one school, we just happen to have at the same time 2 teachers who were on paid leave. And at that time, we also had people who were paid to fill those positions. Now, when they were on paid leave, they were also either on FMLA, so the Family Medical Leave Act, or they were on Oregon paid leave. And in which case, we're still paying benefits for them. So in many ways, you could look at it, those are 2 people, right? So this is a report that's a little, so that's why I'm not saying it's not what we would call a position control report, which just specifies each specific position, no matter who's in the position, okay? So this is, again, this is one way you can quantify that data. As we start getting further on into the budgeting season, you'll start seeing more of it based on a budgetary perspective and a position control report, okay? So that's, I wanted to make that very clear. So the first thing to consider is that, of course, over the year, we've lost about 72 students in enrollment. That's from the latest enrollment report. So how do we break that down? Well, there's several groups that we have in our staffing that we look at. Licensed, which is the teachers union, classified union, administrative group. Administrative are all the licensed administrators, those that require TSPC licenses. Supervisory is that group of managers. Think of it as a management group. And then confidential employees are those that they're not managers, nor are they teachers or classified, but they do work that is, it's administrative in the sense that it really doesn't fit within one of the bargaining units. The best example would be is my HR specialist, right? They're not a unionized position, but they are confidential. Okay, so what we can see is that, and I won't go through all of the individual data points because they're there for you to read, but I wanted to highlight some important things. So really the first 2 pages is what I'm going to focus on. So you can see in the licensed area, so in our teaching staff, that on a date-to-date, where we had about 243.7 FTE last year, this year we're about 200, and that is about a 17.75% drop. In the classified side, you can see that we've dropped about 44 3/4 of an FTE, which is about a 20.54% drop in staffing. The administrative side saw a reduction of about 10.71 percentage points. Supervisory was experienced a significant hit. Those were the other manager type positions, so that saw a reduction of 3 positions. And those positions included your communications person. It included your, you had a custodial maintenance supervisor position that was in there, and then we also had the 3rd position on that was, going back to my pages here, is of course your controller position. So Kim Dowd moved up to the director position, and her position was unfilled. So you can see from a face-to-face perspective, you still have Kim, but in what we lost was a supervisory position. Okay. Confidential employees, we reduced 1 employee that was in the HR specialty area, where we had 2 people. Really was almost like 1.5, because you had 1 person doing that full time, and then the other person was doing it about half time of work in my area and then half time in Kim's area. And now that person is assigned solely for the HR area. And that's another good important thing to know about this in these reportings, is that oftentimes you have employees who may work at different buildings, or they may work in split assignments, you know, even sometimes doing 2 different things, but they have to be classified somewhere in the report. So you really notice that when you get to the building level, where we have, especially this year, we have a lot more employees this year who are split between multiple buildings. So you always have to take that in a grain of salt, because they may show up in one place, but maybe not quite the way you would expect them to see in another building. So you can see that overall we lost about 19%, just around 19% of our employees. That is pretty significant when you think of, if we had an enrollment drop of 72 students, if you just do the basic math and you think about 24, you know, we don't have what we would call hard caps, but we do look at on average, you know, depending on your grade level, it varies. But if you're thinking about 24 to 25 kids in an average classroom, you're thinking, you know, 3, maybe 4 positions at most, and from that enrollment change, but we lost more than that. Definitely a lot more than that, okay? So that's an overall picture of by group. The next piece breaks it down a little bit more into some of the specific categories. It doesn't have all of them, so like for instance, administrators aren't here. But when you look at the percentages is the column that, again, I want to explain to you, and then compare that with the position change, because I think that the percentages is what we look at in HR. Position change, though, is actually what a lot of employees look at, because again, position changes are people. So in our general ed teachers, it's about 20% of drop. Special ed is just under 10%. English language teachers saw a 24% drop. Counselors was the one area where we saw a little bit of an increase, where Pradham and Evergreen were assigned some counselors, but they lost in other areas that you'll see moving down. They lost some classified clerical staff, as well as some assistant staff that they lost. Instructional assistant 1 positions took, on a percentage basis, the heaviest drop. And this is where it's important to know the difference between instructional assistant 1 and 2. Instructional assistants 2 are primarily our special education program assistants. So a lot of the required staffing for those positions is based on what happens through IEPs and the program models. Instructional assistant 1 positions tend to be the general ed assistants. Now there is one special ed program, the LRC program, which has instructional assistant 1s, but by and large, the instructional assistant 1s that we saw a reduction in were our general ed instructional assistants. And that, you know, it's unfortunate, but when you're comparing the 2 positions, you could see why it was that position that saw a much more significant increase, because those are positions that when you're trying to cut bare bones, and that's what we got to a point here, you have to think about where are you going, you have to make strategic decisions. Where are you going to preserve your staffing that you have? And many of the principals last year, the way that the reductions were developed, and it really was a development exercise, is that the principals were allowed to look at their own individual buildings and what they saw as their needs. That's different from what we would call a district-wide staffing model, where you think about an overall paradigm from a district perspective about where you want to emphasize. So for instance, some buildings in 23-24, Robert Frost is a good example of that, were very heavily staffed on IAs, and that was a decision that they made in previous years in the staffing. While you had other buildings that were more heavily staffed, tended to focus a little bit more on the teaching side of it. So when, when they did those reductions, there was an individual school approach. One question we'll have to answer as we go into this budgeting cycle is to what degree do we continue to follow an individualized school approach to staffing versus a district-wide approach to staffing. I think I shared with you earlier on, it was right around the time I started that, it's often more challenging to address a situation where you're starting to receive more resources sometimes than it is when you're reducing resources, because then you have a lot of competing interests that are talking about what is best next for the district, right? So I think we're going to want to be talking about as we go into budgeting, and then also when we come up to our negotiations. This coming spring, we'll be doing negotiations with our teachers unit, for instance. So this is like the first opportunity for me to start sharing data, which we'll start seeing is every month for the next 2 to 3 months. You'll see another type of data set from me, or some key consideration points, because my goal is that by the time we get to like March or so, I need to start having a lot of the data I need in my house to be able to start engaging with our teacher friends.
Hey, Tony.
Okay, so you can see where we saw some significant clerical staff, for instance. That was another area where fewer numbers overall, but we did see a reduction. And the areas that we did seem to see reductions in were, as you start going to, not the lead positions, we did lose one lead. So that would be like, think of it as your head secretary in the building. We saw one there, but we also saw, particularly at the high school level, between OS offices support 1 positions and office support 2 positions, we saw reductions there. So again, that's where you're making strategic decisions about where do you want to keep the remaining staff you have, right? So there were some decisions that were made in some of the specialized program areas where they had clerical support just to support those programs.
And a mad, I would say of that high school scenario he's talking about, that was a mad scramble to try and get that all covered. Like, that was not an easy, I mean, none of this has been easy. Like, this has been very creative.
Anthony, sorry, Anthony. So I'm looking here, so I'm trying to understand this, and you're gonna help me, I know, because you're great at this. The English language learners, so we went down to 4.3. That means I have a hard to believe that they gotta be sharing across multiple sites, right? So that's one of those examples.
Correct.
And then the position change column, that means, are those individuals that have switched into different classroom? What is that position?
The position change means how many, what you would see there would be how many less faces did you see?
Okay.
Okay, so where the FTE is based on the amount of assignment those people had. That's why I focus, right now I'm focusing on the FTE, but I do put the positions there because that's what the average employee is gonna think about. So the average employee is gonna see that, like for instance, on general ed teachers, they might have seen that there's 35 less faces who are doing this work, right? But yet the FTE percentage might change was 38.62. And that's because you can have a situation where you have less people who are either doing more percentage of that as their job, or you may have more people who are doing a decreased percentage of that as their job. That's why you see in some cases here, you actually may see that the number of position changes less than the FTE change, but you can also see the reverse, where the position change is actually, you had an increase in positions even though you had a slightly less decrease in the number of FTE. So again, I put those two columns there because it shows you how it depends so much on how you're defining positions, right? Are you talking about pure FTE? Are you talking about duplicated counts where you have people that also have leave situations where you're almost paying two people at once? Or are you truly talking about faces? Faces are important because that's what our families see. That's what our fellow staff members see. Right? They think about people who are missing, right? But the FTE piece starts getting closer to what Kim would budget into it because she has to report ultimately on what's the amount of money that we're spending on these. Okay, so that hopefully that helps. Okay. The next several pages are really a series of pages on the individual schools. I'm not going to go into that level in much detail because really, I'll go over the Butte Creek one so you get a sense of what I did here. But then it's really, you could do the same analysis with each of the buildings. And I did hear the thing that's interesting here. Someone mentioned about a cheat sheet.
Oh, that was.
I thought about I better put here for all the special ed programs about what they mean. So you do have your little cheat sheet here on the side for you on that. So Butte Creek, for instance, the first thing I put in all these sheets is what the enrollment change looked like. So Butte Creek is an example of a school that went up. So in here we would think naturally, if you were thinking just on broad averages, well, boy, if they went up 24 students, that should be about one more teacher, right? Well, actually they lost some teaching staff. Okay. Now, again, this comes back to the considerations we're going to need to have in the future because one might look at this and say, well, this is totally horrible. It's bad. There's no doubt about that, right? But they're all part of the strategic decisions that were made in past years about how you staff those positions. So one way to look at this was in Butte Creek had in previous years, they were one of the schools that focused a little bit more heavily on their teaching staff ratios. Remember I mentioned Robert Frost spent a little bit more of their resources talking about instructional support. And I should say, because I've already noticed it this year when we were looking at some of the enrollment changes, that when we looked at increased class sizes, in one building, when we had that discussion, the principal and even what we were reported from the staff, they thought, yeah, we need to add one more teacher. At least one of the buildings we saw when there was a discussion about where do we add staff, even the teachers thought, well, we really need program support. So it was a classified position that we brought into the building. So you can see again there too, a lot of this is also based on the individual decisions making that was happening at the schools. So that's another reason why I gave you all the sheets so you can take a look at how they vary. So again, here you can see that, on a school like Butte Creek, they're losing assistants in general ed for special education and special ed and the LRC program and Title I program. Very few of our schools actually have a designated Title I specific aides. but Butte Creek was one that, at least on the books, they had that. The other school I'll mention, which explains the leave issue, which is Central Howell. Central Howell is one of our smaller schools, right? So when you have the impacts based on people on leave, you can see the impact looks definitely more drastic. They did not technically lose a full 4 positions last year. Really was probably more closer to 2. They actually, they were one of the cases where they had a school where at the same exact moment they had 2 people, well, within the same month or so period, two people went on leave, and they were both cases, they were paid leaves. So in that month period of time, you know, Marissa and Sandy Sprower, who were doing this work at the time, also had to upload new positions, temporary positions, which are paid positions, while we were also having to put on the books benefits for the people who were there. And I'm not making any jump, that is the right thing to do if people qualify for those leaves, but it changes the way it looks. And you know, where overall, if you look overall in the district numbers, those small changes really aren't going to change those percentage numbers we're talking about a lot. But at Central Howell, it looks like it's a big difference.
Why do we pull those people off FTE when we still have to replace them with subs? Like, I'm just curious, why don't they're still, we're replacing that individual with an employee. I'm just curious why we remove them from the books on the data.
Yeah, and that's really comes down to a consideration, and you'd get a different answer from Kim than you would get from me. From the HR perspective, what I would say is that in some of the cases with just the subs, who are generally in our district anyway, hired by EduStaff, in many of those cases, a person's missing a day or they're on a short-term leave, in which case we just have a sub. Those subs aren't getting any benefits. You know, so they're not classified as a temporary employee, meaning they're not going to be working more than 135 days. So from the HR perspective, we're not somebody who, I know it's going to sound a little bit weird, but we're not spending a lot of time and our effort on managing people. They're not people that we see we're managing from the HR perspective. Budget perspective, also a lot of times those subs don't necessarily, when you look at the overall cost factor that come into play, they're not necessarily a big cost driver. Some employees though, like the ones, like in these cases that I mentioned, where you are having to pay 2 sets of benefits, when you look at benefits being 40% at least, and now you've heard the changes that we're going to be looking at with PERS, right? When you're talking about at least 40%, there is, at some point you got to think about how do we quantify that? Now it may not be in FTE numbers, but there has to be some way you quantify that. You're at least on the benefits side, you could be paying. And we have, I know of at least one employee this year where the person is on leave for most of the year, and they are then being replaced by a temporary employee. Now, luckily, that employee right now has moved off of Oregon paid leave, so we're not having to pay the second amount of benefits. So that's why it becomes a little bit different, depending on the nature of the time the employee's out on leave. Is it a paid leave or not a paid leave? How is the building covering for that? So for instance, you can have a situation on the classified side particularly where they may be making strategic decisions about how they're going to cover that time that a person's off. By and large, you're going to get a sub, but in some cases, that's not a guarantee. So, you know, I go on and I provide these sheets for all the different schools that you have, and then I'm going to skip these, but please feel free to contact me if you have any questions as you're moving through these. Because if I went through each one, you can imagine we'd be here probably till midnight or so. Central office staffing, though, these are the positions, because people will often ask, well, did administration take a hit? When they talk about administration, they're often thinking the DO, right? So I wanted to make sure that was quantified for you. So we did lose the Director of Teaching and Learning position. A challenge with that, though, is, of course, that those duties fell upon Kim now.
Right.
And Kim and I were just talking about today that both the two of us are struggling right now with all the work, these other pieces that we're trying to do, and getting out to the buildings as it is. But yet, in Kim's position, technically she should be able to spend even more time out in the buildings to try to supervise instruction, right? So you can see where a reduction of a position like that almost has a double impact, right? The course of controller position, now Kim is doing the job of 2 people. Community relations, now in that one, we do have somebody that we're getting a few days of support a week on from our contract with the WESD. 1 day they're on site for us. And then, of course, maintenance and supervision. Right now, that's an area where we've not really fully been able to cover that. We did make a decision, Kim and I, that I'm technically the supervisor for Jeff, but yet that's an area, maintenance is an area where even though I'm on paper maybe his personnel supervisor, but a third of his questions are going to be about budget and resources, and a third of his questions are going to be about key priorities. Kim mentioned like the roofs, right? So it's kind of a position where we still really haven't, we've not come back to where we really could be in these areas. And then, of course, I mentioned we lost a human resource specialist position. So again, I've kind of reviewed these as I've discussed them as I've gone, but there are some things, again, that aren't fully on the report. And when I refer to like the clerical staff, for instance, again, some of those staff have been assigned multiple buildings now. We have a few cases where secretaries the lead secretaries are covering multiple buildings. Charter schools, we provide payroll services for all the charter schools, but the only positions that are really counted from an HR perspective in the charter schools are some of the specialized positions where Brandon provides specialized services for them. And then, of course, district-specific positions, some of them have moved to different locations. I'll give one example. Our community welcome specialist, I'm sure I'm not getting the full title right, but Yolanda, you all know her as Yolanda, right? She in the past, actually even the first few weeks of this school year, was able to be housed at the district office. The strategic decision was made to have that position moved to the middle school because, again, when you look at the clerical side of it, they lost some positions, but yet they still needed some support, particularly for bilingual student support and parent support. So that welcome position we had as a district-wide position, she's still doing something, and we can still call on her, but where she's located is a different building. Luckily, it's not that she was reassigned to the high school, or that'd even be a further distance. So once in a while, she comes in and blesses us with her presence, right? But that's something to think about too. And then moving forward, of course, we just need to think about that as we think about staffing for like next year, district versus those individual type staffing models. What are generally accepted staffing ratios? Counselors, if you go back and look at all those school buildings, the counseling ratio we have is definitely not aligned with what the recommended is, which is 250. Oregon itself last year had statewide about a 345 to 1 student ratio in counselors. So you can tell, even as a state, we're challenged by it. And then here, it's even in many of our buildings, it's an even greater ratio.
And we reported that on Division 22.
Yeah, and then of course remembering too that staffing is the biggest expense in a district, and it is probably the most important consideration leading to student success. But it is one of several. Curriculum, we mentioned that, and that was another area where we had to mark in a few cases that we weren't really in full compliance necessarily, right? Because the quality of the curriculum our teachers have to use is an important piece. The types of assessments we're able to afford for them contributes to student success. Extracurricular activities. There's a lot of research out there that, especially for students who traditionally tend to be marginalized in schools, like if you think about it, how do you get more attendance? Yeah, there's things you can do with families, but if you find ways to anchor and bring those kids in, that's a contributor to student success. So as we think about, there's an awful lot of pieces to this puzzle that we're going to want to talk about as we start getting into the budgeting season and then also into negotiations and whatnot. So a lot there to give you, and this is just the first run at it. So are there any general questions I can answer for you all?
Where's nurses fall under a category?
Nurses?
Yeah.
Nurses is interesting because, see, that's another good point, Josh, because right now our nurses are primarily under the contract. You may recall a few months ago we renewed the contract with our local hospital. Brandon and I are gonna have to start talking the next several months about looking at an RFP process on that, because that's one under our guidelines, we should be doing an RFP. But it would be also a fundamental decision that between an administrative recommendation and then a board decision, at some point does the district want to look at having its own hired nurses versus contracted?
So they're not
No, they're not in
categorized
there.
in here.
There was a reduction in that area though,
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
but they're not considered in these numbers.
in that calculation.
Okay, thank you,
All
Tony.
right, thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Hey, Kim, financial.
Well, the financial reports are uploaded on Board Book. Would encourage everyone to take a look and download those. In light of time, I'm not going to necessarily spend a whole lot of time on that. Just wanted to point out a couple of the key changes super quickly. Over the November report. We've seen a positive change in what I am projecting for our property tax collections. I am projecting approximately $220,000 more than I was expecting in property tax collections. So I'm still thinking we might be a little bit about $35,000 under what I budgeted. Again, please remember property tax collections play into our state school fund calculations. So there's a bit of a yo-yo situation with that. I have not updated what I'm projecting for state school fund at this time. Unfortunately, I was really hoping we would have a state school fund update by this time. Nothing has been released yet, so I'm waiting kind of with bated breath on that. So thinking that our total state school fund revenue potentially right now projecting about $500,000 under what was budgeted. Again, we are waiting on that state school fund update to really see. I definitely am trying to be conservative, but also I think we need to be prepared that we may see some further reduction in that. However, on the other end, our non-state school fund revenue within the general fund. Not a lot of change other than you may notice on function 4100, which is the Oregon Pre-Employment Transition Services. I did not budget any revenue for that this year. That program has changed dramatically. It was formerly a grant in special revenue funds. This is essentially a vocational rehab type service, and the state has changed the way that works. We are now able to bill for eligible services, and after a first couple months of seeing that, I'm actually projecting that we may see about $130,000 from that program this year. Again, budgeted zero, that's $130,000 positive swing. So again, it's really hard when a program is just getting kicked off to know kind of what number to put in your budget. A lot of districts actually chose not to participate in this program this year. So very happy to see that. The end result is that the non-state school fund revenue right now I'm projecting to be about $850,000 over what was budgeted, for right now a projection that we are in the positive, if you will, by $263,000 on our revenue side. How that translates then over into the expenditure side. Previously, very, very, very little change in what I'm projecting for expenditures throughout the year. Last month, the November report, I was projecting that our expenditures would be under budget by about $1.919 million. Right now I'm at 1.886, so only about a $35,000 change increase in what I'm projecting for expenditures. But between those two together, the bottom of page 1 on that revenue report, at this moment, projecting a very healthy ending fund balance on June 30th, 2025. Again, that budget was for a $1 million ending fund balance. I'm now projecting potentially a $2 million and a little over $2 million. I want to be very, very clear that the state school fund estimate could swing this significantly. So while you kind of want to look at this and say, oh, what do we do? What do we do? We should act now. We really need to get all of our information before we move forward. But again, that's the projection based on the information I have at this time.
Okay.
And then your enrollment report follows that, and we did have a reduction of another 3 students since your November report. Primarily we see the movement at the high school level from this time of year forward. We do start to see some reductions, unfortunately, in the high school enrollment. So my projections would be that this number will continue to slowly decrease throughout the year, so.
Okay.
Kim, can I go back to the budget document, expenditure side? Did we talk about printing and publishing?
We did. That was one that I fully missed in the budget.
That's what I
and
thought. Sorry to bring it back up.
No, I appreciate
Quit
bringing it up.
twisting the knife a little harder.
That will be the first thing put in the budget next year. Those are our copier leases, printing costs, those sorts of things. So
Got it.
while that is a horrible thing to have to see there, fortunately, other areas are helping us with that. The other piece is that we have really been working with our schools to be aware of the impact of printing, particularly in color. There's a very significant cost difference. Every sheet is 10 times more in color, than it is, so we really need to be conscious of what we're doing. And I'm really pleased to see that our schools and our staff are being more conscious of that, because we are seeing that in the numbers. So
Way to go, staff.
yeah, excellent.
Good. Well, thank you, Kim.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. The seismic rehabilitation recommendation, that was supposed to be Jeff, but.
Yes, Jeff Alderman, I believe, is joining us remotely.
Oh, okay.
And Daniel, can we promote Jeff Alderman, please? His hand is raised. Give us just a moment. We'll get Jeff promoted and.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
All right.
Good
Do we have any
evening. Can you hear
audio?
me?
Does not sound like we have any audio from you, Jeff. I'm not seeing you muted.
I am unmuted.
There you are.
There you are.
Wonderful.
Thank you for sticking with us, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. Good evening. Just a quick touch up on our seismic rehabilitation for Silvercrest Elementary. We received 5 proposals from CMGCs. That's a construction manager, general contractor. It's going to be kind of an all-encompassing group. So they're going to do the design build in conjunction with our engineering firm, ZCS. 5 proposals came in November. Kim Kellison, Kim Dowd, and myself graded them. We reviewed all of their proposals. We went item by item, line by line. There was 8 categories in which we graded them. A couple of them were touching base on their fees, their approach, their timelines. And at the end of the day, we all felt that Brokamp and Jaeger had the best proposal, the best fees, and the best setup. And we feel like they'll be the ones to lead us forward and get this project done on time, on budget, and within that 10-week break period. So that is our suggestion and recommendation is to go with Brokamp and Jaeger. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I can forward along our review metrics if you're so interested.
Well, now, it's my understanding this is going to take board action to do this?
Yes, sir.
But we're not seeing any of the paperwork or anything here? I'm having difficulty wrapping my head around this.
Yeah.
We just don't have any document.
Are you referring to the actual RFPs themselves and
Yeah, just even having a document in front of us to say the
worksheet.
the name of the outfit and duration of the contract or anything.
So I can provide you some of that. I don't have all of it yet. Part of it, I think, is going to be pending board approval, right? So I have to get approval, and then the recommendation goes forward. And then once you've approved it, then it goes to our engineering firm for them to keep the ball rolling.
This is, yeah.
So I can,
So we're
what I can send you is our.
selecting an outfit. We're not
Correct.
approving
This is
a
the
contract.
approval
Yeah,
of
this
the
isn't a
award
contract.
of
No
the
bid.
Okay.
of the RFP.
Yeah, right.
So if
per
we,
purchase, our procurement policies.
yeah, I think it would be good to have, the worksheet that shows all of the outfits and then your ratings, but I'm
Yeah.
willing to, I don't know, I'm willing to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be ideal.
And- And that document would show their bid, correct, on what they bid for, or they haven't bid it out fully yet, or
No.
explain that.
So no, the bid, the next processes are obtaining bids. These RFPs would outline the fees involved as a percentage of those then numbers
Right.
that come in after this next stage. Jeff, I apologize. Do you want to speak to that?
Nope, that's exactly
No,
correct.
and I think even with the CMGC process, it's different than a traditional submitting of bids and you take
100%.
whatever
Yeah, it's
and
very
evaluate the bids. There's a collaboration here in this process with our contractor
Yeah.
to work on this through the whole process.
Some of the
Right.
most important
Right.
next steps involve a lot of value engineering, looking
Right,
at the project
right.
to determine where can we meet all of our needs while also, identifying ways that those needs could be met in the most the ways that give us the longevity and the construction that we need, but also are there different approaches or different timings, or can we pre-order certain product to, take advantage
Right.
of different things? So, anything to add on that?
I would add that, may I tell you where we scored them? So we scored them on, we read their cover sheet, and then they had a references, was last, they had their, what their body of work was, so what their work experience was, how many millions of dollars they do each year in commercial type projects. And then they had projects that were similar in nature to ours, so we scored them on, whether they did a lot of school projects, or whether it was, a couple of them had less experience with school projects than some of the others. So there was 8 categories that we scored on. And so it was a really comprehensive scoring system, and very thorough look. I mean, there's a manual for each one that's about half an inch thick. So it's an extensive application that they put in.
So if we were to make a motion, would it be something like to approve the recommended GMGC award to Brokamp and Jagger?
Yeah.
Correct.
Does that work?
I believe so, yes.
That is correct. And I'm
that-
sending over our metric. I'm emailing it to Kim and Debbie right now, so they can pop that up and get it to you.
Have our engineers worked with Brokamp and Jagger? Just curious.
They have.
The engineering firm has. Our current engineer has not worked directly with Brokamp, but some of his colleagues with ZCS have worked with Brokamp and Jagger.
Thank you.
And had a positive experience.
Correct.
Yeah, I think having something written that we can review would be ideal before we move forward for me. I don't know how comfortable I am, and I know you guys were very thorough, but at least having very short, and it sounds like maybe that's coming, to be able to review and make an informed decision about moving forward.
What's our time frame?
Yeah,
Does this need to
what's
happen tonight?
That's the
That is a
problem.
very big concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to happen right away.
Yeah, I would say I'm willing to make the approval tonight. Just in the spirit of transparency, though, it would have been better had we had something on board book for the public to see as well.
What?
Yeah, I'm ready to
No, I have
move
something
forward with
different.
it.
You just-
Yep.
Yeah. This is-
So I did just send over our evaluation metric, the Excel spreadsheet on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I
Do-
was gonna say,
Does anybody have any more questions on this? Okay. We'll take it up in action items when we get to it.
This is the one we want to put up.
right. Do
Okay.
we have the totals?
Yeah, here are the totals. So when you look at the scoring,
Is this something you guys could upload real quick?
Yeah.
And we could
Yeah.
relook at it?
By the
right
time
So
we
my question
get to the
is,
action
Can
item.
we publish, I mean, is that Jeff, do you know, are we able to, I mean, is that public information, those
Oh,
different scores?
that's
and
true.
So the
everybody's
scores can
quote?
be requested by any of the firms that submitted proposals. It'll all be potentially public at some
Yeah,
point.
that's-
They generally request that information after the fact, but we're at that point now, so.
If we're not comfortable,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have just mine.
Yeah, I would not get into the, I
Yeah.
would not recommend
How soon do we need?
granular score. But I think if you had a summary, if
What
you
is
had
the
summary
time-
metrics, that would be appropriate.
Yes, a summary like that. Yeah.
What is the
That's
time
just
frame
my
that we?
summary metric. Where's,
So I have the one,
Sounded like.
so the one that we just received from you, Jeff, that shows the three score 1, 2, and 3
Yep.
by category, by bidder. I believe we can share that.
Yep.
Okay, I can put that up right now if you guys would, if we feel confident with that, if it's,
Yeah. Something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
let me,
And then we can probably, you want to move on and then.
Yeah,
we
we'll
can
move
look at it
on
by
and
the
we
time
can
get to-
revisit that at action item then. Anything else you wanted to add, Jeff, for us? before-
No, I think we did a really nice job. We did a thorough review and graded the proposals well. So I feel very confident with Brokamp and Jaeger across the board, and would highly recommend moving forward with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you all understand, we're not doubting any of your work on this.
Oh,
We're
no.
just,
Oh, no.
we're flying blind here.
No, totally understand.
feel your
and-
pain, you know, I did look back at prior, and it was, in our prior seismics, that was a verbal presentation to the board of, we've reviewed them, this is our recommendation. So I apologize for
Yeah.
not thinking to,
Oh, okay.
no, I mean,
Well, if that's how we did
good
it pre-
information, Kim.
yeah,
Yep,
if that's how we
that's
did
good-
it previously.
good to know,
makes
too.
sense.
I think
Yeah.
before that, we've had worksheets.
Yeah.
Like,
Got it.
I've seen worksheets.
okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
appreciate
Before.
that.
I remember we did on a couple other
I
things.
think the worksheet's an okay thing.
Okay.
Yeah, to add.
Gotta orientate myself again here.
You're on number 10.
Okay, we're, okay, discussion on, board, before we even start tackling any discussion items, I would entertain a motion to table all the first reads until the next meeting.
I move to table, I move to remove the first reads from the agenda and push them to the next agenda as, next agenda. Let's just
Second.
say that.
It's been moved and second to remove the first reads from tonight's agenda and move them to the January regular meeting. All those, any discussion?
I think that's a fantastic.
Good job, Phil.
It's too late. It's too late.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nays? The ayes have it. Okay. Now, Andy, I believe you're first up in our, and thank you for your patience, Andy. Out-of-state travel boys volleyball team. You want to come up and talk to us?
Look awful comfy back there.
Could have done worse. We could have removed it after you sat here all this time.
Oh, that would have been
I
mean.
might have said something about that.
You know where I live. No, we won't do that.
Okay, so, yeah, we put in a request by board policy for one of our teams to travel out of state. Our boys volleyball program is a club sport, which basically means they fundraise all of their money for whatever they do. And so, everything that is listed, I think you should have 3 sheets of paper. One of them is the field trip request form, and then the others is the details of each. If you take a look at the cost of the trip, if you go down to the bottom where you see total approximate and that per individual, that's if they fundraise no money. So if they actually raise $12,419.20, that per individual would be at 0. So So this is before their fundraising efforts. So I think I'm here to answer questions.
Okay,
And please ask me a question. Any question.
How big is the team?
It's about, they're gonna take,
says 12
I think
players.
12,
Says
yeah,
here.
12 kids, and then a couple of coaches.
4.
Yeah,
That's my question.
Yeah.
Mine as well.
Yeah, and there's no names here. It's just other than
I can tell you the names.
other than Benson, but it doesn't.
Marty, let's see, Benson Short is one of our is one of the coaches. Bradford is a coach. I can't think of his first name right
Adam.
off the top. Marty Limbert is one of the coaches. That's 3, and I'm not sure which the 4th coach they're talking about. But they're all coaches that have gone through our process of background checks.
Background checks and all that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And since it's a club, we don't put applications out for people to apply for it.
Yeah.
And the funding is all privately, it's
The
all been
funding is all
fundraised.
fundraised, yeah, this is no district money at all.
It falls under our purview here, according to policy. It talks about acceptable travel arrangements, that seems to be talked about in here. Parental involvement, what parental involvement's been involved in this?
We'd have a letter that would go to the parents giving them, the kids permission to go. Make sure that they knew where they were going, give them an itinerary of the trip.
Okay, and then it talks here about orientation of students and supervisors on, as far as
Just our general supervision of kids.
supervision,
when they're under-
expectations.
yes,
and-
when you have them under your supervision, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, making sure they have emergency books, emergency contacts, and things like that.
Yeah. And, okay. Anybody else have any other questions for Andy?
No, I think it's a great opportunity for kiddos to be involved with their school, and I hope that we can build a good program. I hope the whole state can develop programs like this.
Yeah, this is year number 2 as an emerging sport. So the OSAA, which is really kind of a shock that they have not introduced a new sport since 1974.
Now they got 2 emerging sports.
And when they did, when they went with the Title IX and they added the girls' sports. So this was a little bit of a shock that they went with boys volleyball, because it does skew your numbers Title IX wise, because your Title IX numbers should be this similar percentage of what your student population is between male and female. So to add a boys' sport kind of throws it off, but their comeback is, well, we're going to do girls flag football.
Well, there's girls wrestling too, right?
That's really cool.
Correct. Yes.
But do we have girls
We
wrestling?
have girls wrestling, yes. Yeah. But you only have maybe 12, 14 girls out, and you probably have 60 boys.
So that's my clarifying question. So it's not the boys basketball, girls basketball, volleyball. It's numbers of athletes involved to follow Title IX. Because when I was at Oregon down in Corvallis, I remember they added girls track, but there was no male track. It was like there was, because of I think the wrestling team, they were able to offset some of these numbers. So I'm just trying to understand how this works with OSAA and Title IX by adding the sport. But you say they're taking care of that by adding. I didn't even know that flag football was coming up. When did that get decided? It's
That was
cool,
this-
but I'm.
Well, we're trying to, what's the right word? We're trying to not think about it because we don't really want to add another sport because capacity-wise, I mean, we're kind of the size of the school that when you add something in, it's going to take away from something else.
Some other sport.
Transportation budget.
Transportation, budgets, kids, all that kind
Some
of stuff.
cases, facilities.
But,
So will this then, do you think, remain a club sport for quite a while?
I don't know if it will or not.
Do they have any kind of a timeline?
3 years is what they give them for an emerging sport, and then they will go back to a proposal after next year and determine whether they're gonna make it a sport.
And I suppose that the Title IX discussion is happening at the state level. You know, it's not just us being concerned about our numbers, it's everybody? No?
And the other thing about adding a sport is just because it is offered, doesn't mean that you have to add it.
Right.
So
Got
for
it.
example, you know, skiing is also offered, and snowboarding is also offered, but we haven't adopted those.
Okay.
So, if you do get too worried about numbers, then you can say, hey, this is great, but we're gonna have it still be a club program, or no, we wanna bring it under the fold and we want it to be a full-fledged budgeted sport. So you have that option even if the OSA determines that it's gonna go to a OSAA sport. And there's only certain, for example, we have a really good trap shooting, but OSA doesn't sponsor trap shooting. So you could have a trap shooting team of 50 females, but that's not gonna count, count with your Title IX numbers, because in order to count with Title IX, they have to be in a league and they have to compete a league schedule. So that takes up, like our dance team is not counted in our Title IX numbers with the OSAA because they're not in a league, they just do competitions. Or our cheerleaders, they're not in a league, they just do competitions, which hurts schools because traditionally those are filled with female athletes.
Even though there's OSAA championships, both of those.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
But you can't, but they don't count in
They
our
don't
Title
count.
IX numbers.
Interesting.
This is very illuminating. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I assume speaking of OSAA, I saw on there, we weren't listed yet, but I assume since they're doing this, that we are in fact gonna have a boys volleyball team this spring?
We'll have a club team.
Club team, that's what I
Yes.
mean, but isn't that?
I wouldn't, yeah, if
Oh.
if we weren't gonna.
Well, that's
do a
what
club
I
team,
assumed,
don't
but
think
I
I'd
was.
come and ask you for them to spend
Yeah.
this money.
No, that's what I assumed, but.
And it does serve, you know, one of the neat things about high schools is that there is something for every person to get involved with.
Right.
Everybody finds their niche. And we do have a percentage of kids, this is their niche. This is what gets them to come to school.
Again, any other questions or comments for Andy?
Maybe someday we need a Title IX talk from you. Just the things you've said tonight are like totally nothing I've ever really thought about before. So I would appreciate that at some point. But that's not my job to ask you that, so sorry. I'm just expressing interest.
And not tonight.
No, yes, not tonight.
So,
At the end
okay.
of the meeting.
Okay. Okay, again, thank you, Andy, very much for
Thanks, Andy.
your patience.
Thank you.
Thanks, bud.
Okay. Where are we now?
Should be 10B, Equity Committee.
The OSBA election?
Oh, the OSBA
No, you
elections.
skipped,
Equity.
skipped
Equity.
equity.
Oh,
equity.
equity, that's right, my bad.
That's super quick. You guys asked
Yeah.
for recommendation.
Right.
Yeah, and those are the members that, we went back through the applications, and that is who we recommend, is that list right there.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
You're
thank you
welcome.
very much.
And we included both students that were on. We didn't pick or choose the student. We
Okay.
threw them both on there.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so any discussion, further discussion from board members on that during this
Just-
time?
I
Yes.
just want to take a
Josh?
quick look. I'm just going over the names compared to my list, that's all.
Okay.
It just was.
Okay, now on to the OSBA elections. Hopefully you all saw my email several days ago about looking at this, and OSBA has an election every 2 years, and they, our particular area didn't have anybody that filed for a candidate for the board of directors from OSBA from our region, so that will be nothing. But then there are legislative policy position there with 3 people, and there's 3 different resolutions. And first of all, is there general consensus that we want to participate in this election?
I'm not too excited about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't.
There's no requirement, just so that everybody understands that.
I guess I'd like to hear why. I'm not opposed, I'm just curious the reason.
I just haven't done any research on these. I mean, I know one of the candidates for one of the positions. I don't know the others. It's really hard to make decisions. When this came up on the agenda, I didn't choose to invest time figuring out all of the, because we, you know, I don't know, did we get emails about this? Like, I didn't want to dig through and.
Yeah, OSBA sent out several emails to us, and then about 10 days ago, I sent one out.
I got yours.
That would be on the agenda, so
I just chose not to put a whole lot of stock into it, so that's just I'm an uneducated voter.
Yep, that's where I would fit on that.
Agreed.
So
and I'll tell you, I put it on there to give the opportunity since it'd been asked for by OSBA, but.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm just, my concern about this is, you know, how do I say this? Like, if we don't have a voice, then we really can't complain when they go a certain direction that makes, well, one of the things I think is important, they were talking about raising the dues, and I did want to have a discussion about that briefly, is who pays our OSBA dues? Is that the district office?
Yeah.
It's definitely not us.
No, it's the district.
But that being said, okay, so then we'll just be okay with whatever decision they make financially, so, okay.
Can you give a summary of what you know about the what we're deciding?
What was it was gonna go up by a pretty significant amount, when they were writing about it.
So that's on number 3?
Yeah, that was just, the dues schedule it was an interesting one to me. But we also get a lot of legal help for them too, correct?
Yeah.
And they were saying they haven't had any increases in like a decade or longer,
No.
so.
It seems like a lot of people are going post-inflationary world too,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
especially if they haven't had an increase in 10 years.
Well, there's really no point in discussing if we're not gonna vote on it, so, I would be opting to vote for it, but that's just my opinion.
I don't think we've decided on that, Josh. I
Yeah,
think it's-
no, just, we're in the discussion stage right now.
Well, I feel bad, like, asking you guys to vote on something that you guys didn't. I don't wanna do that to you guys. That's my opinion, but.
Phil, when do we have to have our vote in?
What's that?
What's the timeline?
15th.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it happens
so-
now or never.
It's this
Now or
meeting
never.
or never.
Got it.
And,
So the dues increases, just looking at their spreadsheet here, if adopted, it looks like the 24-25 dues are just shy of 6,000. Then they would go up by about $1,000, 25-26, another $1,000,
yeah,
27-28.
roughly 1,000 a year for
About
us.
1,000 a year, all the way up till 30-31, in which case they'd be about double at that time what they are
Is
now.
that per member?
Up to, that's
No,
for a school
district.
district of our size.
They're
It's based on
done by
our total
size
enrollment.
district.
Yeah.
They go from the very small districts, pay like $250.
Yeah, the very smallest of districts, under 100 students.
So it doubles our fee in how many years?
By 30-31, so it goes up $1,000 a year essentially between now and then. We're at about $6,000 now.
Is it 2031?
Yes.
Oh, here it was. Sorry, I did have it.
Well, okay, so the nice thing about this ballot though is that,
You can be selective with what
Yeah,
you
you
vote.
can
Yes.
put no action
You
on
can
them.
do no action on things and
that
vote
makes-
on things
that-
you want to.
Yeah,
and
got it. That's good.
So,
We can take an action on one of the numbers if we want, or one of the, if we, you know, if we feel strongly, like we were just talking about the dues schedule, if we want to,
Right.
you know,
Right.
We don't have to take action on the other ones. We
No.
can do no action taken.
Not at all. So would we like to discuss what we think, discuss now, and then during action, we'll take care of it, but discuss now what we want, would want our vote to be on that,
Sure.
on the dues? That's resolution number 3, the resolution 1.
My question for that would be to the district office, does this, with our budget stuff, does this put us in a, is this okay? I mean, would you guys feel comfortable with this? I'm assuming we get our monies back on legal recommendations from them.
Yeah, they're very helpful. I mean, I don't think that's a huge increase.
I guess that might,
You know, all the training and stuff.
We
that-
use them
that
a lot.
helps them too, you know, that we just had
Yeah,
one
it's-
last session that paid for that.
Yeah, it's pretty helpful.
Yeah, they haven't had an increase in quite a few years, and now,
I would be comfortable adopting that resolution 1, you know, to adopt the increase in fee schedule and then just do no action for the rest of them.
rest of them.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am as well.
Okay, sounds like we'll be ready to go then at action time.
Well, do we have a sense that of what our vote is gonna be?
I think so.
I think
Yes?
so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, that's the feeling I have. Okay.
Thank you, Phil.
Yes.
have
That's
to add
it
action
on
item?
discuss, that's it on discussion, oh, public comment. Okay. Got a public comment time.
Oh,
If you would like to speak during public comment, attend virtually, use raise hand feature. If you're attending in person, please approach. I don't think anybody's approaching. Do we have any raised hands?
We do not have any hands raised
Is
online.
there anybody awake out there? Okay.
Yeah, we have guests that are hanging in there with us.
Oh,
That's
okay,
pretty
good for them.
impressive. I'm impressed.
More power to them. Okay. Now we're to the agenda item of approving the recommended CMNCG award. And entertain a motion on that.
I move to approve the recommended CMGC award to Brokamp and Jagger.
Second?
It's been moved and second to approve the CMGC award to Brokamp and Jagger. All those, any discussion?
No, I just thank you for putting that up.
Okay.
sorry, I didn't get to review it yet. Did it get emailed or just updated to?
It's on the board packet.
It's
I
on
think.
the-
Can put it up,
Just refresh.
right?
And yeah, I did not realize it had gone live, so yes, that was the,
Sorry, I don't mean to drag it out.
yes. And we ask for your patience, that may not be quite the public,
Yep,
pretty
no, that's-
version that it would be if
It's all
I
good.
hadn't just done it right now, so, but yes.
Well, it actually looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you.
Yes.
Those are the each of the categories, the available points within each, and then the totals.
Perfect. I think that just adds a whole lot of
Yeah.
transparency to this
Transparency and
process.
clears the fog, so to speak.
Well, that's a good recommendation by you, Chair, too, to just make sure we're doing our due diligence, so.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Okay.
Any discussion around this?
Mm-mm.
Okay, call for question then. All those in favor of the motion? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nays? Ayes have it. Okay, and we're down to approval of the out-of-state travel for boys volleyball team.
I move to approve the travel for the, I move to approve out-of-state travel for the boys volleyball team.
Second?
It's been moved and second to approve the out-of-state travel for the boys volleyball team. Any discussion?
Just a quick clarification, just want to make sure people, the funds for this are fundraised. There's no district funds.
Right,
No
we're
district
just
funds.
authorizing them to be able to do it.
Yep.
Good question.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nays? Ayes have it. Approval of the Equity Committee members.
I move to approve the members of the Equity Committee as published in Board Book with the list of names.
Second.
Been moved and second to approve the Equity Committee members as published on Board Book. Although, any discussion?
Thank you, equity team members.
Been moved and second, okay, so vote now. Approve the Equity Team members. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Ayes have it. And then the OSBA ballot.
I'd like to move to complete the OSBA ballot, taking action on Resolution 1 with a vote of yes, and marking all other items no action taken.
Second.
Been moved and second to, on the ballot, to vote yes for
Resolution number 1.
Resolution 1, and to mark all else as
No action.
no action. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. And can you take care of that getting in? Thank you very much. Is there any future items requested for the agenda? Because we're short of them.
We got our schedule all set for the rest of December. I was curious on the calendar. We're good, right?
Well, there is
Aaron
no,
brought something up earlier. I was curious about that.
in what respect to board meetings, you mean?
Yeah.
We do not have a work session this month, so
Okay.
we are done till January.
January.
Adjourn.